Thank you. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting, February 12th, 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you would remain standing for a moment of silence, and give a moment of silence for Kurt Reed, who recently passed away. Kurt was an Abington resident since the age of 2 and spent his work career as a milkman delivering dairy products on the South Shore for many years. He was also an associate member of the Summer Concerts Committee. Kurt, along with his wife Nancy, his high school sweetheart and wife of 56 years, who we met in the 5th grade at the North School, was recognized by the Abington VFW and Abington Lions Club for service to the community, and in 2008 was honored to be chosen as the Grand Marshal of Abington's St. Patrick's Day Parade. Kurt will be sadly missed by his loving family and friends. Also, a moment of silence for Helen Ware, who recently passed away. Helen was a lifelong Abington resident and worked for many years in the school cafeteria, serving lunch to hundreds of students. The students and staff will remember her for her sense of humor and how she liked to talk with the kids. Helen was an avid reader and was a frequent face at the Abington Library. Helen would be sadly missed by her loving family and friends. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we have a full agenda tonight. So 6:30, Henry DiCarlo, an update on Abington Camp. Oh, announcements?
You don't have to, if you
No,
don't.
go ahead, Henry, I already called you up. We'll do announcements right after that. I'm in such a hurry, I want to, we've been dying, we've been trying to get you in for a couple of meetings. Some of the members have asked for an update on the Abington Camp. We're excited about the new cable studios at the high school, so if you can give us a little update on what's going on with the Abington Camp, we would appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you putting me first on the agenda because I have another meeting to get to tonight. For the newer members and for those that might be watching from home, we've had cable in town for well over 40 years now, and we went through a series of cable providers, was it Heron and Campbell and Adelphia, and then Comcast eventually, and they were all succession companies. And at that point, with one provider in town, they ran the studio. Back in 2008, I guess it was, we licensed Verizon to come into town. The Selectmen licensed Verizon to come into town. And they have a 15-year initial license to provide. And it took them about 4 years to wire everybody up, but generally they did provide service to every house that wanted it. And Comcast at that point, their renewal came up on a 10-year renewal the next year, I think 2009. I might have my years off by one, but and at that point they opted to shed the studio responsibilities. The cable provider had always provided in this town the public, the educational, and the governmental channels. So they then turned the studio over to the town. The selectmen and the town formed the Abington CAM, a separate organization to do those channels. And we were in the existing studio and had been there since that time. And this was older equipment. We worked with the school department when the new school was put on the books. And what we've done is that Abington CAM, through the small fee that was set up to charge providers as part of your cable bill only, not your internet or your phone, that comes to us, we then set that up to fund the Abington CAM. And we've been putting away a capital fund for a number of years. So when the school came up, we worked on a memorandum of understanding with the school department, and they provided the space for a cable studio, or for a TV studio, for control rooms, for a teaching space, and for the cable office to be there in the new school. We have a memorandum of understanding with them. We have provided all the equipment in that building. They put the wiring in for the between the various facilities. So we now, in the new high school, middle school, we now have a cable studio that's a shared space for the teaching of the television and production classes and for the cable studio to run. And this is completely equipped with brand new equipment. We're out of the lease space, and it has another advantage, and the other advantage is it's on the town's fiber loop. 10 years ago, I guess, maybe a little longer, the town put in a loop of fiber, I guess maybe a dozen years ago, to all the town-owned buildings. And in this fiber, there were black strands, dark strands, available for future use. We were never able to access that because we were in a rented space, which was not a town-owned building, not on the loop. So now that we're on the loop, we're working on that. So the cable studio has been fully equipped. We've already started doing production with the schools. We've started doing production with the, in the auditorium, in the gymnasium, feeding it back. Justin's working to get all the kinks out of things like any new situation. We ran into one glitch. We got there early. You know, as you know, the school opened a season early. We ran into one glitch, and that glitch was that we had one piece of key equipment last month that developed some issues. We tried to resolve them locally and had to go back for warranty work. And we were down for about 3 weeks. That equipment is back. We're back up and running. Justin's got about 30 programs that he's processing, getting up online, so we're back into full service now. The school has already been using it as a teaching space. We're starting to do some programming there. We're ready to ramp up to the next level right now. We are paying the school a small fee every month for the services, housekeeping, electricity, things like that, which is similar to what we were paying in rent money at the other, lease money at the other building. And this is now going to the schools to help cover the cost of that building. And it seems to be working out as, you know, at least initially the first few months as an excellent operation. I mentioned that town fiber loop, and what that's done for us is working with Wayne, the technical support person for the town, and the schools. We are now ready to set up a camera situation at the police station at the Emergency Operations Center, so that in an emergency situation, the chief would be able to, or whoever town officials were there, would be able to access the town's cable system and get things out. It'll come back actually through this building and out to the school through the fiber, but Wayne does that stuff. I don't know. That's way over my head. So we have that in progress right now. We have the funding to be able to do that. We're also looking at upgrading some of the equipment here in the town office. We've repurposed some of the old equipment to the senior center. We also made a donation to Massasoit Community College because their TV studio could utilize some of the older equipment in the teaching that they're doing there. So we were able to do that, which didn't avoided the problem of us having to dispose of it or find uses for it. So things are going very well, and we're getting ready to start, now that Justin's got the equipment back, to open up again for some new classes on the new equipment, get things out. We also, I should mention, broadcast the public programs, you know, the governmental programs, the public programs, a lot of sports, as you know. And what we'll do is we'll put them up for a certain amount of time on the cable channel, and then they will also go up on our YouTube page on our website. So that somebody needs to access a program, doesn't catch it when it goes or it comes in later, they can go and look at it that way. So that's generally the update. I'd be glad to answer any specific questions.
Abington CAMS, for people out there, stands for?
Abington Community Access and Media Incorporated.
Okay.
The lawyer, Bill August, came up with that because it's shortened to Abington CAM. Of course, it doesn't fit on anything when you type it all out. And the school has given us signage. They've given us our own entrance, a secure area so we can access the building without compromising the alarm system and the rest of the building. Most of our work tends to happen during hours when the school's not in operation. So we're looking, excuse me, we're looking for people wanting to produce shows, wanting to learn about the new equipment. Justin will be posting some classes coming up on the new equipment. You know, we're looking for anybody who wants to come and see. We participated in the open house at the high school, and we'll probably run some kind of an open house ourselves down there for the studio. It seems to be working out very well so far. Good relationship with the schools.
Members, questions?
I have a couple. What was the cost of the equipment that, in the school, the new equipment?
I think, I don't have,
Ballpark.
I don't have the actual numbers here now, but we're looking somewhere in the $400,000 range.
And that all came from the small fee that's on our cable bills?
Yes, that was,
How much is that fee roughly? Just
well,
so
it's a
people-
percentage of your cable bill, and it was set, and I can comment on that. It was set at the time we did this in equity and parity with what other towns were doing. at a percentage, and I think it was around 4% initially, and then it went down, decreased down in a couple different steps, reducing down. What we didn't anticipate at that time was that people are buying a lot more services from cable. And so that percentage actually gave us a very robust funding source at that point, both in the 15-year contract with Verizon and the 10-year contract, or 10-year license with Comcast. What we're watching very carefully at this point is what's going on with subscribers of cable. There are a lot of people that are shedding their cable and going to just online streaming and all that, and it tends to be a younger age group that's doing that. So we're watching that carefully. If somebody has Dish, or if they have just streaming, then they're not contributing to that. But right now, our costs are going to actually be down a little bit. I should also mention that over the last couple of years, we brought Justin on full-time in anticipation of this project. He was a part-time employee at that point. We have one other part-time employee that works a few hours. We're going to be funding a couple of internships at the high school. But our costs are primarily, the production is done by volunteers.
Alex, you had another question, or?
Just, Henry, a couple of years ago, you gave us a nice synopsis of what was going on, financial as well, and I know the contract we have calls for that. Can you put together something?
Absolutely,
like
we can do
again,
that.
just so-
As you know, Andy, I've just been meeting with our accountant to close out the books for last year. We're on a calendar year basis, so we're just closing
Yeah.
out the books for last year. I can
This
absolutely
this was
do
in 2013.
Uh-huh.
You had a balance of 387,000. What, do you know what your balance is now offhand?
We're probably, and again, I haven't, because some of the bills are still coming in.
Yep.
We're probably around in the 400,000 range, so we're very
After
significantly
paying for
well-funded.
everything at the school?
Yeah, now that does not count what we're going to be doing with the police station and a couple of other projects we have pending, but, and we want to keep somewhat of a cushion in there because we're not sure what the future is leading to, but we're using, we're using the money very wisely, I think.
How many board members do you have?
There's a 5-member board,
5?
And they meet and make the decisions on where the money's going to be spent?
yes.
One's appointed by the selectmen, one's appointed by the school committee, and 3 are to be elected by members of CAM. And anybody can be a member of CAM, basically. Just sign up online and you can be a member of CAM.
If you're a cable subscriber.
I don't know if you even have
I
to
don't
be
think
a
you
cable
actually have to be a
I don't think
cable
so.
subscriber.
Citizen of the town?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was kept very broad. And this is under federal and state laws, and, at the time, the town manager at that time brought in a specialist that specialized, an attorney that specialized in cable, and he set us up very similar to what I think I've seen 5 other towns that he utilizes as models, and we're set up to it, so. But we're close, this whole system is closely regulated by primarily federal law, under the FCC rules.
Who decides what usage the station will be used for? Like, if there were groups in the town that wanted to put something on film, is there any limitation on what people can do?
Very little limitation. Under First Amendment and under the federal laws, I mean, it's open to, and unfortunately, some towns have run into little problems with that, but generally, it's open to pretty much anybody that wants to do broadcasting. We leave, program decisions primarily up to Justin and setting them up and figuring the times and the frequency and all that. I try not to, make sure that we don't micromanage that.
And as far as the funds that you have, if I understand correctly from what you said, that the 5-member board meets and votes, decide when funds will be.
Yeah, we've had this project in the pipeline for, well, probably, Andy, since you were on the board, waiting for this new studio. So, and as far as the decisions on the equipment for the new studio went, I mean, it was the specific equipment Justin and the engineers picked out and decided on. We didn't try to micromanage that because, frankly, none of us have the technical knowledge on that, whether we wanted this server or that server, or these cameras or those cameras. I mean, that was, pretty much up to Justin and the engineers.
Is there a posting of what positions are needed or need to be filled for Abington Cam available at the website? Or
Talking about
for
employees?
studios? No, just for the like, you need projectors, projection people, production people, editors. I mean, is there a flow and tide of what jobs are available for the public to volunteer or participate in, publicized on your website? Do you know if that's being done at all?
I don't know that we specifically have the specific positions there. I think we've had, and I'd have to go back and look at what's there right now. And again, we're going through this transition right now, so we're updating things.
Yeah.
But generally, we've been looking for volunteers, and we've made it pretty well known that, we're looking for volunteers, and well, some of you volunteer, and others in town. We also, by the way, should recognize a volunteer extraordinaire, Billy Davis, who puts in thousands of hours of volunteer time. We've offered to pay him, we've offered to, compensate him in many ways, and he's out there all the time, videoing for
I think
us.
we gave him Abington's Best Award a couple of years ago.
You did.
All the work he does
Yeah,
with cable.
Henry, who are the 5 members on the board right now, do you know?
Currently, we have, let's see, let me think. Myself, drawing a blank here. Brenda Pignon representing the school committee. We've got Lisa, and we've got, as the representative of this group, Tom Corbett, who represented the public, has been on for a number of years. Myself, and I'm drawing a blank on the 5th one, and I'm sorry. Senior moment here.
Any other questions for Henry?
This contract currently is up September of 2019.
The Comcast contract?
Yes.
Yes.
Have
Yeah.
you, I guess we should probably start to think about the Cable Advisory Committee getting reactivated to look this over and maybe negotiate
Yes,
a new contract, is that?
I would think so. I mean, this is, we're at the beginning of 18 right now. It comes
Yeah.
up in 19. I think it's
Time goes by quickly, though.
September of 19, if I remember.
September
right.
of 19, yes.
Yeah, September of 19. I know that in the past, we went to a specialist to handle this, but I believe our existing town council has people that do cable, so I don't know which way this board's going to want to go. And it really isn't,
No, that's more of a board, I was
really
just
isn't up
raising
to,
it, so.
it really isn't up to
people
Cam
are
to
aware
do
of
that,
it.
but that is a heads up.
Yeah.
Now, your Verizon license, I think, doesn't come up until 4 years later, I believe it is, 3.5 years later, because the initial license under the federal laws was a 15-year, and renewals are 10. Don't ask me why. I can't explain federal regulations.
Okay.
Other questions? Or?
I think we're all set.
All right, and I will get that
Yeah, if you
right
could
up
just
to
give
you.
us a written report.
And we'll
that would be
double check, Bob, the website and make sure we've got announcements up there that,
I'm just thinking if the public wanted to get interested, they could at least see the list of what they could possibly volunteer to learn.
Believe me, if they go volunteer, they'll get a crash
I
course
know
at
they'll go,
everything. No, they
people
will.
tend to be
It's
hesitant
amazing.
to go if they want to look,
If
see
you
something.
walk in there,
up
I've walked in there and I've had to man the camera a couple times, so it's fun, though. It's fun.
One other suggestion, Henry, I don't know if you have, but the bylaws to the corporation, do you have those posted on the website? Or?
I don't believe they are up on the
Might make-
website, but we could do that very easily.
Yeah, I think that would make some sense, I think,
Yeah.
just, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Henry.
We're going to do public announcements now, public announcements, because I know Henry had another meeting, so I wanted to get him in and out. Any announcements down the end, Tom?
Yep, there will be an LCR tournament to benefit the Abington Education Foundation, Saturday, March 3rd at the Knights of Columbus Hall in Abington on Hancock Street. First round begins promptly at 7:30. To reserve your spot, please contact Aaron McGrath at 617-251-9017, or Danielle Grafton at 617-827-3187. And there's a link where you can go to LCR tournament. This is a new tournament that's starting to go around. If you ever played left, right, center, it's pretty interesting, so. And on Saturday, March 17th, at the Knights of Columbus, there will be an Irish night. Cocktails start from 6 to 7, dinner is at 7. There'll be dinner, there'll be music, there'll be raffles, there'll be dancing. It is $25 per person, and that again is at the Abington KSC, 254 Hancock Street.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes, the annual Boston Bruins PJ Drive and for those of you who don't know, they collect new pajamas for kids, and they're asking local kids and teens to donate and bring the new PJs to the town, to the Abington Town Library between February 1st and March 15th. I know the Bruins have been doing this for many years, and it's a big success, and they help out a lot of families with this. So again, that's new pajamas between February 1st and March 15th. Bring them to the Abington Town Library, please.
Thank you. Andy?
The annual town election is April 28th, and nomination papers for the town election are now available in the town clerk's office. There are positions for Board of Selectmen, Board of Assessors, Board of Health, Sewer Commissioner, School Committee, Trustees of Public Library, Water Commissioner, Planning Board. All interested parties should take out nomination papers as soon as possible, and nomination papers have to be returned by March 12th, 2018. Town Clerk's office is open for a voter registration until 8:00 p.m. on Monday, April 9th, which is the last day you can register to vote in the April 28th annual town election.
The Abington Garden Club. The Abington Garden Club will be meeting on Monday, February 19th, 2018 at 12 p.m. at the Parish Hall at the United Church of Christ on Route 18. A luncheon will be served and hosted by Roswitha O'Hara and her staff following a presentation by Leanne Shea, who will demonstrate workshop on terrarium dish gardens. Bring your own container to use. All of the materials will be provided. Interested gardeners are invited to attend. Again, that's on Monday, February 18th at 12 noon. Little League registration. Registration for the 2018 Little League season will be held as follows. On Tuesday, February 20th, 2018, at the Knights of Columbus Hall from 7:15 to 9 p.m. On Saturday, February 24th, 2018, at the Abington High School Gym from 1 to 3 p.m. And on Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, Knights of Columbus Hall from 7:15 to 9 p.m. Boys and girls ages 15 through 16 as of August 31st, 2018 are eligible to participate. Please remember to bring your birth certificates. They are required. And one other announcement I have is just to make sure we're all aware that the Abington St. Patrick's Day on March 18th will occur, and please come out and have a good time.
Thank you. One last announcement. This year, the Teen Advisory Board at the library has requested permission from the Board of Library Trustees to promote a Food for Fines campaign from February 1st through the 28th. Overdue fines on Abington books may be paid by bringing a donation for the food pantry to the library. The library trustees, library director, and staff are proud of our Teen Advisory Board members for identifying a community need and developing a program to address it. So food donations at the library. 6:45, we have a request for transfer of common victual license 800 Brockton Ave for a double horse bistro, I believe. Is anybody here to speak on that? Yes. If you could state your name, please, because I wouldn't be able to pronounce it, I'd mess it up, but your name, please?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Ewell, and I'm from Double Horse Bistro at 800 Brockton Ave, Abington, Unit 5.
All right, and that is replacing, is that what Margot's was? Or what?
Yes, Margot's, and then,
Dixon Stones.
Yeah, J-Rock Cafe.
J-Rock Cafe, so next
Yeah.
to Sticks and Stones, okay.
It's next to Sticks and Stones.
Next to
yeah,
Sticks and
that's
Stones.
where J-Rock was.
Okay.
Okay, and I think we have the inspections were done, I believe. Recently, inspections from the fire department, no concerns with the license transfer to these locations. Hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 8, Saturday, 8 to 9, and Sunday, 8 to 8. And this is a restaurant serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Yes, correct.
Any questions? No questions. Okay, all taxes are paid up?
Yes.
Yes, everything's in order?
Nothing
Okay.
from the police department.
I don't have anything from the police department here, but
There's no issues from any
No
inspectional
issues?
department.
All right.
Everything's in order.
I will entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the application for a common particular license for 800 Brockton Avenue, Unit 5,
For the
Second.
transfer, okay.
for the transfer, called Double Horse Bistro.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Good luck.
Look,
Oh,
Thank
luck.
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. 6:50, Jim Fitzgerald from Environmental Partners, a traffic study at the intersection of Chestnut and Hancock Street. Welcome, gentlemen. Just a little background on this. The Old Colony Planning Council did a review on this first. Is that the way it worked, Rick?
Yes. Actually, with Doug, John Stone actually had been working with Environmental Partners on this for a period of time.
Okay.
I know you're working with John.
Sure, yes, absolutely. Again, my name is Jim Fitzgerald. I'm with Environmental Partners Group, and we've been working with Public Works on improvements at the Hancock-Chestnut intersection. And they've asked that we come here tonight to present on that, as well as the Complete Streets funding program as well.
Right, the Old Colony Planning Council had been working with the Complete Streets part of it for quite some time.
Correct. OCPC, for the intersection itself, OCPC had done a road safety audit back in 2014, so they started the ball rolling with this way back when. And I think what I might do is, if it's okay with you, start with the Complete Streets funding.
Absolutely.
So I have a lot of slides here that I will go through quickly. So if you want me to stop and continue with in more detail, certainly please let me know. So first, let's just start with the basics. What are complete streets? Complete streets are roadways that provide multimodal accommodations. It's for all users and abilities. So it's this new drive in transportation to not just focus on the vehicles, but also think about the people living in a community, the pedestrians, the cyclists, transit users, etc. There are all sorts of well-documented benefits for complete streets, certainly safety being a big one. Studies have proven by providing accommodations, safe accommodations for bikes and pedestrians, for instance, you're really dramatically helping improve the safety at those locations, reducing the amount of crashes. Certainly there are also other benefits as well, health by providing alternative modes of transportation as a form of exercise, improving risks of obesity, et cetera, as well as local economies have experienced stimulation because of these treatments being incorporated along the roadways, and certainly in the environment, reducing the amount of emissions by allowing for other modes of transportation other than vehicles. And a question that we hear a lot is there a need? You're looking at a roadway where there aren't very many pedestrians or cyclists along the roadway, so really should a complete streets approach be considered? And it's not always the case, but certainly one thing to keep in mind is a quote that's really applicable. You can't judge the demand for a bridge by the number of people swimming across the river. So in other words, if you're looking at a roadway and you don't feel as if it would be a comfortable place to bike or walk, you're probably not going to bike or walk along the roadway. There's a time and a place for everything, and certainly there are some places where complete streets really are a great asset. And all sorts of studies have proven that, yes, if you build it, they will come, the bikes and the pedestrians. Many different facets to complete streets. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are lots of controlling factors when you're looking at roadways. Certainly right-of-way and environmental impacts are huge. It's not the goal to, in this complete streets kind of approach, it's not the goal to be causing impacts to these sorts of things. So every road has its own unique character that you have to look at one by one. So although we talk about complete streets for bikes and pedestrians, it's also very important to maintain vehicular access. Of course, we're not looking for traffic jams by any stretch. But in the old days, the approach was the wider the travel lane, the better for the vehicles. Well, now we've learned better, and we know that through decades of experience that the wider the travel lane, the faster the cars move. That's not always safe for the vehicles, never mind the pedestrians or cyclists. So different widths of roadways should be considered for that character of that roadway setting. There are all sorts of accommodations that could be looked at for bicycles. Certainly we look at places where bicycle lanes are applicable. There's a time and a place for every kind of an approach. And one thing that we keep in mind are the different types of crashes that occur in different settings, certainly with on-street parking, not that that's a huge issue here in Abington, but car dooring is a major concern, where car doors opening on the cyclists result in quite a few crashes each year. Oops. Shared use lanes is another consideration for bicycle accommodations. I don't know if you've seen this pavement marking that you see on the right side of the slide, the double arrow with the bicycle. You might wonder what this little pavement marking might do. It actually has proven to provide quite a bit of safety when used in the proper locations. It's usually not a terribly fast-moving roadway, 35 or under, but it helps to increase the distance between the cyclists and the motorists behind them by alerting them that, hey, the cyclist does, in fact, have a place in the roadway. Separated bike lanes, a little bit more extreme, where you have separate accommodations for the cyclists, separate from the pedestrian foot traffic and the motorists. All sorts of variations on this that I won't explain now, but certainly let me know if you want to know more about that. And shared use path. You know, in a lot of locations, you will look at a roadway and say, gee, if we striped a bike lane, would I still feel comfortable riding my bike on this? We're working on a TIP project right now in Hanson, for instance, where it's a bit of a roller coaster of a roadway. And so trying to get residents to the local schools and ball fields. And the consensus was, gee, having a shared use path would really provide an asset that we feel would be safe for our children to make the connection to the schools. So each treatment that you look at has different levels of comfort. The more significant the improvement, the more comfortable it is, the more it will draw in those alternative modes of transportation like biking or walking. Certainly we have to watch out for ADA compliance when we're looking at pedestrians, and keep in mind transit connections with sidewalks and transit facilities. Traffic calming comes into play. Traffic calming is very important when it comes to complete streets. It's a way of having vehicles behave differently when they travel along a roadway through alternative means. So studies have proven, of course, if you're hit by a car while you're on your bike and the vehicle is traveling 40 miles an hour, there's an 85% chance of death, versus 20 miles an hour, only a 5% chance of death. So obviously the slower the vehicle, the safer it is for pedestrians and bicyclists. And traffic calming is just a strategy to introduce self-enforcing capacity and speed reduction along the appropriate roads. Again, there's a time and a place for everything. Different traffic calming devices that I'm sure you've seen out and about, things like bump outs or curb extensions, where you're narrowing the roadway a bit in areas where the road is excessively wide. Helps this feeling of tightening, certainly helps to slow vehicles down, and also improves visibility for pedestrians who are trying to cross the street, because they're able to have better viewpoint of the vehicle and vice versa. Median islands helping to slow traffic down, again, the feeling of tightening. But in a lot of cases, you'll see this with crosswalks, where pedestrians are able to cross one direction of traffic at a time, making it much more pedestrian friendly. Road diets, I don't suspect that being a big issue in Abington, but in locations where there are excessive number of lanes, rethinking what those lanes are and how they could better be used. And raised intersections, raised crosswalks. Anytime you raise the elevation of a roadway, it really does slow traffic down. These are not speed bumps or speed humps, for that matter. These are much more gradual, much easier for plowing, but providing a similar kind of effectiveness where the vehicle realizes that they better slow down. This is a special location, especially for pedestrians crossing. And roundabouts. Certainly a great traffic calming device, and when installed in the proper locations, they really do process traffic very efficiently, all the while making it much more pedestrian friendly, because if you look closely at the image on the right, you can see the crosswalks cutting into, connecting to median islands, allowing, again, pedestrians to cross one direction of traffic at a time instead of both directions of the roadway. So why are we talking about all this? Well, there's a Complete Streets funding program available through Mass DOT. It started back in 2014 when the governor signed a transportation bond bill allotting $50 million to be spent over 5 years, and there's been quite a bit of back and forth about having to do with figuring out what the process would be, including involving different municipalities for their input. Finally, in 2016, the program was rolled out, allocating $12.5 million for the first 2 years, 2016 to 2017. The process was delayed, and the $12.5 million, incidentally, was spent in 2017. The objective of this program is to really encourage complete streets, encourage the municipalities to think about these kind of safe features for bikes and pedestrians on the day-to-day basis, and coming up with a strategic and comprehensive approach to make strides towards that. As an incentive, what they're offering up is up to $50,000 for each municipality to come up with a prioritization plan that I will get into momentarily. They're also offering up to $400,000 per year per municipality funds for implementing some of these complete streets treatments. The improvements just really basically have to do with anything that would cover the multimodal accommodations, anything that having to do with pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, etc. And this program is not intended to be a burden to the municipality. It's supposed to be improvements made in places that make sense and as available, based on available funding that the town may have. I won't go into all the different things it covers. It covers a wide variety, from traffic signals to street lighting having to do with pedestrians, to traffic calming devices, different types of bike facilities, bike lanes, sharrow markings, sidewalks, wheelchair ramps, curb extensions, different type of calming features at crosswalks, for instance. So while Chapter 90 is very limited for your roadway construction, a lot of communities are considering this for these much-needed improvements for their sidewalks, as well as many different things, signals, etc., and transit. Things not covered: straight maintenance. Things having to do with roadway maintenance, etc. If there's not a complete streets angle to it, it's not covered, basically, which is fair. The process to access these funds basically takes place within 3 tiers. Tier 1 is establishing a policy in the town. Tier 2 is coming up with a prioritization plan for the town. And then Tier 3 is pursuing those funds, those $400,000 per year for construction. So Tier 1, the policy, involves coming up with a policy townwide for complete streets. It's something that's adopted by the town, and the focus here is to come up with a policy that makes sense and is feasible. There are different parts of the complete streets policy that Mass DOT does outline in great detail. Different components having to do with vision and intent, core commitment, etc. One of the important things to point out here, it also wants the municipalities to identify exceptions. It's important to come up with realistic goals, and a lot of the complete streets policies you'll see wording having to do with improvements, changes will not be made where costs or impacts of accommodation is excessively disproportionate to the need or probable use. So it's got to make sense. They're not looking to put in bike lanes everywhere. In the end, the complete streets policy is submitted, is adopted by the town and submitted to Mass DOT, and it gets scored. And an important thing to point out here is that many municipalities, and I'll show you a map of it in a little bit, have been pursuing these funds. So there are all sorts of complete streets policies out there for the cities and towns surrounding. And in most instances, one is copied from one to the next, because the wording is enough to get a score, an adequate score from Mass DOT, all the while being lenient enough to be realistic for that municipality. Of course, in the larger cities and towns, it's a whole different story. They really dive into this a lot more than the smaller towns do. Next, once that policy has been submitted and approved by the state, then the town prepares a prioritization plan. Now, these prioritization plans, the Mass DOT recognizes that that towns have limited resources, limited staff to create these prioritization plans, and certainly limited funds to pay for them. So they are offering up to $50,000 for this, for technical assistance in preparing these prioritization plans. And although they say it's up to $50,000, as the process has advanced and the Complete Streets funding program has become more and more popular, it's become more and more competitive. So Mass DOT is although they haven't changed the wording, the number that is actually more realistic is between $35,000 and $38,000 in reimbursement for technical assistance in preparing a prioritization plan. And to get into what the prioritization plan includes, it's a plan for the community identifying what your needs are and the priorities that you would like to have them addressed. There are many different ways of preparing a prioritization plan. Typically, the way what they're based off of are gap analyses, which involves looking at what assets you have for different multimodal accommodations, where there are gaps, and more importantly, where does it make sense to fill in those gaps. You know, locations close to schools, for instance, would tend to be a high priority. A lot of these tend to be with GIS mapping, utilizing online scoring, having to do with how important that roadway is for creating a walkability condition. Although this is a required step in trying to get those Tier 3 funds of $400,000 per year, it's also a very useful tool for identifying what needs you have in the community. An opportunity to step back and look and see what you have, what you need, so that as future improvements are made or future maintenance is addressed, you consider things like, oh, maybe we should add in that missing gap of sidewalk here because it would be very helpful. It also provides other benefits of allowing different departments to work together. Every city and town is different, but in many instances, you know, this is a great opportunity for there to be a lot of communication, because this really is a collaborative effort. It's not one department calling the shots. It's a group of individuals coming together and working together to identify what those priorities are, and identifying what other funding sources there are, and most importantly, allowing you to use your funds more efficiently in the future, and so that you can address some of these other needs. So once a prioritization plan is prepared and submitted to Mass DOT, they review it and approve it. Then you can pursue the funding for $400,000 per year. All these submissions are done incidentally on the online with a portal that Mass DOT has set up. So next I'm just going to get into what projects seem to be getting the award. Well, the official response from Mass DOT is that 1/3 of the monies need to go to municipalities below the median household income, and after that it's spreading the money out between the different districts, having to do with safety, high crash locations, mobility, access, etc. We've gone through and summarized some of the projects that have been awarded those Tier 3 funds in the past. This was FY17. A lot of pedestrian mobility projects, sidewalks, ramps, filling in those gaps. Also, that's on the second column. And the last column, you see there's a lot of traffic calming features that were incorporated. And in between, there are several bike mobility accommodations, as well as vehicle operation improvement kind of projects. And digging into the information a little bit further, there really is not one set type of project that is being awarded these funds. I know it's hard to read, but on the left column, the left colorful column has to do with population. About half of the communities fall under less than 50,000 in population. Environmental justice area, again, a mix. It's not necessarily one type of project that Mass DOT is looking for. It's really a mixture, and a lot of that has to do with spreading it out into different areas. And what we've found is that the number of projects that they're awarding has increased a bit. They're still allotting the same funds, that $12.5 million over the course of a year, but the number of projects are increasing. So instead of $400,000, a lot of communities are getting in the 300,000s, but every city and town is different. And you are allowed to reapply for the funds year after year. They don't want a community to have a project under construction and also to be awarded another year of funding. But you are allowed to pursue multiple years of funding if you're so fortunate to get some of the $400,000 each year. Another thing is that the construction has to be done in 1 year, so that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at right-of-way impacts and public outreach, et cetera. A lot of these, the more attractive projects tend to be the easier ones, the ones that are less controversial, something that can be implemented relatively quickly. This map is available on the online portal. It's showing the different colors depict what stage each city and town is in the process. And if you zoom in on this area here, there's Abington. You can see a number of communities surrounding you are have approved policies. That's the green, or the orange have approved projects, ones that have gotten construction already. So there are a number of communities throughout Massachusetts that have already pursued these funds and are moving on them. And this just has to do with the breakdown of the construction costs that have been allotted. That's FY 2017, again, $12.5 million. And there's a schedule based on when there are 2 rounds each year for Mass DOT, and a set schedule that Mass DOT identifies when certain things need to be submitted, etc. So that is the end of the Complete Streets funding discussion. Would you have any questions that you would like to discuss before I get into the intersection?
I noticed that the contractor has to be Mass DOT approved. Is it a requirement that we use a Mass IT contractor, or can the town's DPW do it?
The town DPW cannot do the construction. You have to hire a Mass DOT pre-qualified contractor.
And I assume there's a list out there available for us?
Yes, yes.
Is that a competitive bid?
It is.
Okay. I'm good.
Andy?
Yes.
Just on the technical assistance, how does that process work?
So the way it works is that you first go through the tier 1 and get your policy in, and again, quite honestly, a lot of cities and towns a lot of the smaller towns are copying each other's. Once that gets approved, then you can pursue the technical assistance. What they do is they ask for, what we've been doing is we've been providing the towns with all the documentation that they need. So they're looking for legal documentation from the consultants having to do with, are you Mass DOT pre-qualified, and they're looking for audited rates, and they're looking for the scope of work, what's going to be done, how much is it going to cost, and that all gets submitted through the portal to Mass DOT.
You assist with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And everything is done on that portal. It's a back and forth. And if Mass DOT is looking for something, they'll send a message back saying, hey, please submit X, Y, Z, and that's how.
How long does that process take?
Well, it varies. Mass DOT, for instance, I showed you that chart with the schedules. Things are sometimes dragging behind. For the technical assistance portion, I want to say it might be maybe 2 months, something like that, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
I can give you the exact info. And everything that you submit takes a little bit of time, but it's the policy review, I believe, is shorter than that. But it really varies depending on what flow they're getting at the time coming through there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I understand this has to be a town vote to be submitted to Mass DOT? The town-
It's
policy?
the policy is correct
Town
by the
meeting vote?
selectmen,
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen,
Or
yes.
just the Board of
Just the
Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
The highest elected boards.
Okay,
All right.
that's
I'm
important.
glad the planning board's here for this. There are a lot of older streets in town need sidewalks desperately, so if that would fall into this category.
Absolutely. And, Chapter 90 being as stretched as it is, it's a good opportunity to address some of the sidewalks.
Absolutely, that's great. I'd like to see the board adopt the policy. Okay.
Step
Thank
one,
you, that was actually, and could we get a copy of that? I know we don't have a copy of that.
the slide
The
presentation.
slide
Yes,
presentation.
I have that.
Oh, you do?
Okay.
Perfect, all right,
I have
great.
it.
That was very, very
No
informative.
problem.
Thank you.
And what I can also do is I can provide you with copies of other communities' prioritization plan, I'm sorry,
Priority.
policies, complete streets policies,
That would be
so
helpful.
that you can compare and see what the wording is and,
I'll send that, well, through John Stone, and I'll
okay.
work something that's a little more tailored.
Yeah, I'd like to get started on that right away, it sounds
Yes.
good. Yeah, sounds like.
Okay.
All right, next.
All right, next. Two for one here.
Actually, let me
Go
ask,
ahead.
there are planning board members, do you have any questions about the Complete Streets program at all?
I work for the Old Colony Planning Council,
Oh.
I'm pretty familiar with it.
I bet, absolutely.
I noticed that you had MEPC and GIS back, come on, we Old Colony Planning Council.
There you go.
Correct that slide.
Absolutely.
I think I have a copy of it with both
I haven't seen it.
Environmental Partners and Old Colony Planning Council, actually, so.
A lot of the Old Colony Planning Council. A lot of them have done. It's a terrific program. And
There is
I've
down
heard
the other.
An awful lot of presentations on it.
I bet you have.
I think I'm trained on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
gonna be
speaking,
approved.
I think it would be great
We've
for
been
the
working
town
on
to
that
have.
for years.
I agree.
As we get into this discussion on the Hancock Street and Chestnut Street, if planning board members or anyone from the audience has any questions, please just raise your hand. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So, now for Hancock Street at Chestnut Street intersection improvements. The focus of the project is, of course, to address the safety deficiencies that exist at the intersection, having to do with crashes, intersection delay from the side streets. We know, obviously, that there are a lot of delays that could potentially be leading towards driver frustration, perhaps drivers accepting a gap in traffic that they ordinarily wouldn't have if they weren't delayed so much, and considerations for improvements for things like pedestrians and cyclists. The project at this point is anticipated to be funded through the TIP process, Transportation Improvement Program, or at least that was the initial thoughts from Public Works. This is a 5-year program of federal funds that reflects the regional transportation needs. The TIP pays for the construction and construction administration, but it's the town's responsibility to pay for the design. The projects go through the Mass DOT review submission as a result. So the engineered design portion of this project is pretty strictly dictated by Mass DOT. Right now, however, we're in the conceptual design phase. OCPC had done a road safety audit in 2014. In 2016, the town initiated the funding process with submitting the project need form, the PNF, that was reviewed. And in 2017, last year, we were hired to assist with taking the project a step further, work involving performing a topographic survey, since grading is an issue at the intersection, as well as coming up with some concepts and preparing the project initiation form, the PIF. So we're just at the beginning at this stage. So just to orient you, Hancock Street is north-south, and Chestnut is east-west. There's the county store in the top left corner. So we looked at traffic volumes that were collected by OCPC. It was included in their road safety audit, and we projected these volumes out to 2018. And really, the higher traffic volumes really, there's a decent amount of traffic in the morning, of course, but in the evening peak hour, these numbers here depict the peak hour traffic volumes, the amount of traffic going straight, left, right. And as you can see, we've got quite a bit of traffic going along Hancock. southbound 320 through movements along Hancock, but you've also got quite a bit of east-west traffic that's stopped at the stop lines along Chestnut Street, 347 eastbound, 247 westbound. So a substantial amount of traffic coming from the sides as well as
Is
along
that-
the main line
Is that per hour?
per hour.
And what are the high peak hours? Do you know? or-
I would have to, honestly, I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
One thing to point out here also is these volumes, again, there was from the 2014 road safety audit, and I believe the counts were conducted in 2013. So we projected them up to 2018. Moving forward, the next phase of the project would involve basically recalculating, recounting these volumes to see how they've changed. This slide here depicts the amount of traffic traveling per day. And I see from this direction, it's kind of difficult to read it this far away, but there's pretty substantial traffic along each of the 4 lanes. These are vehicles per day. All the approaches, with the exception of one, have about 6,000 vehicles per day, so it's pretty evenly balanced. The other leg, that western Chestnut Street leg, has about 8,000 vehicles per day. So it's pretty substantial traffic, especially since a lot of those vehicles are experiencing a stop sign.
There's
The
a stop sign there? No, I'm only
Well, there's supposed to be stop.
Yes.
Of course, crashes are a big issue here at this intersection. We took a look at some Mass DOT information, and there were 31 crashes in a 5-year period from 2010 to 2014. 11 of the 31 included injuries. So if you compare the amount of crashes to the amount of traffic traveling through, you find that there's a pretty high rate of crashes. We have 1.22 crashes per million entering vehicles, which is 110% greater than the district and statewide averages. So that's pretty substantial. Incidentally, Mass DOT has ranked this location as one of the top 5% worst crash hotspots in the Metro Boston area. That has to do with crash information from 2011 to 2013. So certainly a location worthy of improvements. Just running through some of the existing conditions at the intersection, it is an expansive amount of pavement. It's about 100 feet wide by 70 feet the other direction, depending on how you measure. It's a lot of pavement to deal with, and of course there's the hill. Traveling down Hancock, it's a relatively steep hill at 9% grade. And then there are sight distance obstructions, things like the hedges on the southeast corner, for instance, that really make it challenging for the side street traffic to see around to see if there's a vehicle coming. The combination of the grade and the obstructions are challenging. So as a result, vehicles tend to edge further and further into the intersection. Travel speeds in the area tend to be greater than what the posted speed limits are, depending on the approach. Heading westbound on Chestnut, for instance, they're 19 miles per hour over the 20 mile per hour posted limit. So there's certainly some areas where excessive speed is taking place. And for pedestrians crossing the roadway, that northern leg, they have to cross the road for about 65 feet. That's a long time to be in a roadway, especially with traffic flying down the hill on Hancock. So we also looked at the level of service at the intersection under existing conditions. Level of service is just a way of applying a letter grade to reflect how much delay is being experienced, A being very, very good, F being a failing operation. And we have failing operations along both Chestnut Street approaches. Of course, it's fine along Hancock, but that's because it's a free-flowing movement. So substantial amount of queues taking place, especially along the eastbound Chestnut Street approach, extending way back. I think over 1,000 feet on that approach during the evening peak hour. So, in summary, we have lots of crashes, poor sight distance, poor delineation, a lot of open pavement. we have travel speeds that are excessive and poor level of service. As I'd mentioned before, on a lot of instances, vehicles experiencing a lot of delays and queues, again, tend to accept a gap in opposing traffic that they ordinarily wouldn't, and just to try to break through after waiting for so long. So it certainly has an impact on safety. We took a look at a number of alternatives and identified the pros and cons, and I'm realizing now that the green on the pro side you can't even read from here. My apologies on that. Could you try shutting the other light off? I don't know if that would help. Nope.
Addresses SD issues.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I've got the printout right here. Thanks. So. Okay, so under the first scenario, first alternative, we looked at a stop sign configuration if we did a multi-way stop and what would the benefit be there. And it certainly would slow traffic down. Not that stop signs are not a traffic calming device based on MUTCD, but vehicles would have to stop, in theory, at the approaches, so that would improve the sight distance conditions. However, what it would then cause is stopping on a hill, traveling downhill, approaching the intersection during icy conditions could be a problem. It would also result in a poor operation, a poor level of service. It would be a bit better for the side streets than it was under existing, but still a failing operation. So not a great alternative. Next, we looked at signalization. Signalizing the intersection would resolve the level of service, would improve level of service and delays dramatically. But again, we're going to be causing stopping on that hill during icy conditions is a bit of a concern. And not only that, but this is not helping to calm traffic if that's one of our objectives in this project. An important thing to point out here under this scenario is that in looking at the preliminary information for a traffic signal, it does not meet one of the warrants that is required in the state of Massachusetts for installing a traffic signal warrant, looking at 8 hours of traffic, or at least it didn't back on using the 2013 traffic volumes. Again, if this option were to be pursued, we would recommend collecting new data, updated information, traffic data, to reassess those traffic signal warrants. But unfortunately, as of right now, I don't believe warrant number 1 has been met.
Which means there's not enough traffic going through that intersection?
During an 8-hour period. The other warrants look at smaller time periods, like 4 hours or 2 hours, or, peak, 1 hour. But, and all that commuter traffic coming during rush hour.
Yeah.
But warrant 1, required by MassDOT, looks at 8 hours. So it lightens up quite a bit in the middle of the day.
Yep.
The next alternative that we looked at had to do with geometric enhancements. The idea of trying to calm traffic, like I was talking about before, anytime you get that feeling of tightening, it slows cars down. So potentially considering something like a median island treatment along Hancock that would also in turn serve as a point of refuge for those pedestrians along that northern crosswalk. And slow cars down traveling down Hancock. We could also tighten up the corners substantially, depending on how much those corners, depending on how tight we want to make those corners, we might almost consider mountable treatments that would allow for right turns by large-sized trucks, all the while promoting a tighter configuration for a regular passenger vehicle. Again, that feeling of tightening. So what this would do is it would slow down traffic some, but it does not address your issue having to do with delays and level of service. You'll still have those queues along the side streets and those heavy delays, which, as I discussed before, are likely contributing towards some of those crashes, especially since the majority of the crashes that have been experienced are angle collisions between the two roadways. So, doesn't fix all of the conditions. Lastly, we had considered something like a roundabout. As I mentioned earlier, a roundabout is a traffic calming device. It helps to process traffic very efficiently when used in the proper locations. Here we have traffic volumes that are pretty even between all four legs, which are great for roundabouts. Would operate, the operations would be very good, would slow traffic down, calm traffic, would allow for points of refuge for those pedestrians trying to cross the street in the middle of the intersection, in the middle of the roadways. The only con under the roundabout scenario is the fact that the topography and the slope of the hill. Under this scenario, what we would recommend would be to try to flatten that slope out a bit. And we've started to take a look at what that might look like, playing with the grading of the intersection itself as well as further to the south down Hancock, trying to flatten that, not flatten that hill, but just soften the hill a little bit, all the while remaining cautious of any sort of impacts. Really, this roundabout alternative does address all of the issues, but it comes down to costs and trying to blend in the grading without having impacts. And that concludes the discussion on, or concludes my presentation on the intersection, open for discussion.
So is that your recommendation, the final, or you're not making a recommendation? You're making a
Well,
form of recommendation?
We're here to talk about, or I'm here to talk about what the options are. I mean, I have my preference, but unfortunately, if we were to install the roundabout, personally, I think the roundabout would be great at this location. The challenge is the topography, and working with that hillside to soften the slope, perhaps pick up the elevation of the intersection a little bit, and lower the height of the hill a little bit to try to chase the elevation. And we have done different scenarios of construction cost estimates, completely ballpark numbers as far as what this might involve. Even under the signalized alternative, we have to make sure that we have adequate visibility to those signal heads as well. So depending on what the profile ultimately, the elevation of the roadway ultimately is on Hancock, there may be some grading modifications under the signalized alternative as well. So it's just a matter of narrowing in on what the preferred alternative is for the town.
And do you think this would be eligible for that TIP funding?
It would be,
Would be?
yes.
Questions from the board?
Did you say you had a roundabout figure for the roundabout? Or,
Okay. So completely ballpark. Again, this has not been designed out. So I'm always hesitant to be quoting numbers, but it's approximately 1.1 million for the roundabout scenario.
have you estimates on the other scenarios as well, or?
Yes.
Might as well give them all to us.
Sure, sure. So if we were to do the signal, if it were to meet the signal warrant, one, that is.
Which it has to do in order to put a signal there?
Which it doesn't yet, right. So the traffic signal option, without having to modify the hill, is about 870, like 900,000. If we were to modify the hill, it would be more expensive than the roundabout. But, you know, there are treatments with this, I shouldn't talk too much about the signal because it may not even be realistic at this point, but if the signal option were to advance, to be justified, and there are other treatments that could be used if there were visibility issues having to do with the signal head, things like red signal ahead, if we're, you know, just as a extra precaution given the crash history at this location. But again, we're talking about vehicles stopping on a hillside, which is not preferable, but it happens.
Do you have the cost for the rounding the curves and putting the
Yes, that's about,
narrowing of the Hancock Street?
yes, mountable corners and islands, that's about 550, about 533.
Still not,
Cheap.
only partial solution, though. It still
Correct.
doesn't solve the problem.
Correct, and you know, when dealing with traffic calming devices, a lot of it has to do with driver behavior. So although that feeling of tightening is certainly a help, it's less impactful than something like a roundabout or something like a raised table intersection where there's an actual, you feel it more. So there's varying levels of effectiveness for traffic calming. Earlier, I was talking about lane widths. Striping lanes narrower actually has a slight traffic calming effect as well, to a much lesser degree, but still traffic calming nonetheless.
So what's the next step?
Well, I would like to know if there's any sort of opinions on these options, any sort of conditions that we didn't discuss or I didn't bring up earlier that you would like to discuss and incorporate into the, include in the consideration for identifying.
Wayne?
Yeah, for me, I don't go down Chestnut Street anymore, and it's west toward Brockton. I go all the way up 120, 139, and take a left on Hancock Street there.
Do the same thing.
Because that intersection is terrible.
Agreed.
The problem with it is even if you stop at the stop sign, which you always do, then you've got to go forward quite a number of feet.
To see.
To look up the street.
Yep.
While we were there in, I guess
2014, yeah.
I went across it with the DOT, Old County Planning Council, the police chief, fire chief, and so forth. I went across the street and talked with the lady, the homeowner on that corner. One of the problems is that hedge, which is a pretty simple problem. And she said, oh, I don't want to take the hedge down. And I said to her, would you be in favor of having a stone wall put up closer to your house? She said, oh, yes, that'd be great. I did mention it at the time, and that would give you the visual, and that's what you need in any case, even if we did nothing. It wouldn't be that expensive to handle that problem. And coming the other way, it's not really a problem. You have a sight line, but you're way out in the roadway.
Yes.
And then you're looking right, and people coming from 139 or have to go fairly fast around the curve and up a ways down, but still, after you finally decided that it's okay coming, looking the other way, you're in trouble. And then the other problem you have, you've got people taking left-hand turns. And that's a problem both ways. So I really think the town could enter an agreement with the lady there in the meantime. If you're talking, we started today, you're probably talking 3 years from now. I don't know how many accidents you'll have in 3 years ago, but
I agree with you that I think that even as an interim measure, addressing those hedges would be important. And as part of our survey, we've, of course, identified where the right-of-way is. And there is space on the corners to make some changes there. You know, a lot of times, I'm sure you run into the same thing where there is a misconception on where people's property lines are located. So that's why we do surveys, is to figure out what we have for space. And so perhaps as an interim measure, there could be discussions with that landowner about where those lines fall and what could be done to come up with a good solution that works for everyone.
Bruce?
The project needs to get on the OCPC too. That's
Yeah,
2-3 year process.
takes time.
I went to the 25% public hearing for the roundabout that's gonna be done at the Chestnut Street, Boundary Street, North Quincy Street intersection. And it's interesting, they went through all the alternatives. One of the things they said was that if they put four-way stop or the lights, you'd have rear-end collisions, a lot of rear-end collisions. You know, a lot of folks testifying at that hearing about the accidents. I personally like the roundabout. I mean, you'd have two roundabouts in a row. You'd have Chestnut Street and Hancock Street, and then down, further down, and you have, I think those things really are the best plan, as far as,
And public perception is, as you know, is always a challenge with roundabouts, because there's a lot of misconceptions about them if you don't have them in your community already. But that's great that, you know, people have seen that they work in places where they've been installed and properly designed. I might add.
I can tell you at this public hearing, there were some comments that people were freaking out that they didn't want to have it. These things work, and then the way the MassDOT and the consultant who was, I think the engineer was, anyway, they explained it, and there were plenty of diagrams. And there are enough examples of these things that you know, you have to be objective, and you have to look at all the options, I totally get it. But myself, I think that would be the best option, but I'm telling you, you've got to get it on our, speaking of the Old Colony Planning Council.
Absolutely.
You've got to get it on our tip, as soon as you
Absolutely.
can. Because the other one is on the tip. We have a lot of projects in Abington that are on our tip, and that's how you start to fund it.
And this isn't particularly a huge project, so you might have more flexibility to get it in as a filler.
Rick?
I would encourage the board to consider taking another traffic count because we're now entering a period of near full employment, which means a lot more cars on the road during all times of the day, particularly during rush hour. I assume some of that is factored into the projections, but I would certainly think an accurate count would be worthwhile to undertake. Second, what I don't know if this takes into consideration is that there is this fairly significant commercial development being planned for Chestnut Street just down the road from this site, this intersection site, that if built would result in, I would say, a couple hundred to several hundred car trips a day. And that would certainly add to the numbers and the need to have some sort of remediation at that site. I also don't know if because there is a commercial development being located down the street and it's part of a planned economic development issue, if that would give us any additional points towards the tip and getting it funded sooner rather than later.
There's also a thing too, that Old Colony, just did a speed study on Hancock Street. So I know the guys put up traffic counters on that street. I remember doing the turning movement counts at Chestnut Street and Hancock Street, and the other end. And it's an amazing intersection. But we're not there for 8 hours.
Right.
When we do a TMC in the morning, we're there from 7 to 9, and the PM is from 4 to 6. But the machines, if you put the traffic counters on all 4 legs of the intersection, that's gonna show you the peak hours of the traffic. Because what machines and traffic counters do is figure traffic volume, vehicle type, and peak hour of traffic. So, you probably have to do another TMC, but you don't do an 8-hour TMC. I wouldn't wanna do an 8-hour TMC.
Right, yeah, we would do what we would recommend would be the 7 to 9, 4 to 6 turning movement counts, and then at a minimum, the tube counts, or ATR counts, however they're collected. Technology's changed.
I think Old Colony did some, you talk to Bill McNulty or Kyle Bauer, you could get that information as far as that.
Okay, great. And when was that?
Bill McNulty, oh, actually.
No,
Kyle-
when when was that collected?
Within the last month or so.
Oh, awesome, great.
We're careful about doing them in the winter time.
Yeah.
Because we don't want the roads plowed out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But, I've had to go out and fix those things. And
Yeah. Try to avoid it as much as you can.
If you talk about the roundabout, and you said $1.1 million, is that the cost for the entire project?
That's for the construction.
That's for the construction. And now that would be taken care of by TIP.
Correct.
The engineering would.
Engineering would not be, correct.
Do you
And
have
and that's,
estimates for the engineering for that?
I
Or is it 10%,
I don't.
5%?
I don't. I would have to prepare that.
Because that's what the town would be on the hook for
Well,
that,
Chapter
correct?
90.
Correct.
Chapter 90
Chapter
program would
90.
be throughout Chapter 90 funds.
And it's a gradual process, as we know. TIP takes years. So typically you get through the 25%. 25% is typically half of the design cost, because although they call it a 25%, it's really more like 50% of the design. You do your survey. Well, we've already got the survey. You do your functional design report, and you do all your design, basic design, get it to a certain point. And so the Chapter 90 can be spread out to accommodate that kind of a design process.
And I would imagine we've been contributing to that up at the other end of Chestnut Street, correct? The design and all,
Yes.
coming out of the Chapter 90
Correct.
funds?
Yes, again, spread out over a
Yeah,
number of years.
spread out,
No, that's-
right.
That's correct, yes.
I mean, we've all seen how those roundabouts work in Braintree.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
basically two in a row there, too, if you go. over
Yes,
the road.
I actually live in Braintree, and
Okay.
when they went in, I heard from every person that, I've lived there my whole life, and a lot of the locals swore that it was the most ridiculous thing they had ever seen. Everybody was irate about it for the first month or two, and then after that, they all came back and said, gee, you know what, you're right, they really do work. I can get out of that street now, it's so much better than it was. So there is, I know, that was pretty risky there. But, you know, we've done presentations where we show the before and after statistics, and the population that doesn't know what a roundabout is tends to be negative about it at the beginning and tends to be positive after it's done, and it's all part of roundabouts, I guess.
Even if we fit the criteria for a light, I mean, I personally would like to see a roundabout there instead. That's just my personal opinion. We've got enough traffic lights here.
You'll see that one, was it 2019, 2020?
Town into a city.
A few weeks ago, they said, I think we should be doing it this year. It's really programmed for 2019, 2020, for that, one that I was talking about down there.
Really?
So within a couple of years, you'll
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
So I think the question's already been asked, but what do we do next? I mean, do we have to decide as a board?
It would be preferable if there's a selection. That would certainly allow us to keep the ball rolling and wrap up our analysis to try to gear towards the next steps.
I would think so. Let's just start over.
I mean, should we just seek input from the DPW? and the
Yeah,
police
obviously, you know, Jim's here because of John Stone, who, by the way, was willing and able to come, but we actually gave him the night off. But he's obviously a proponent of the Complete Streets program, and not necessarily the roundabout, but I'd say that's his leanings are towards a roundabout too. But we don't have a specific recommendation from our public safety professionals in John specifically. If you'd like us to get one, we would be happy to do that.
Yeah,
If
I
you
think
feel
that
you'd
would
like that, we'd be
We'd have to
happy
put
to
it
do
as an
that.
agenda item to vote on it anyway.
Right,
so.
You know.
right, yeah.
All right. Any other
I
comments?
think it should be on another agenda, and I think the
Yeah.
public should be able to come and give us some input,
That's-
too.
Absolutely.
I'd be happy to do that, yes.
Mr. Wing?
I was just wondering if the board in the short term would take Wayne's.
I was just going to bring that up, Bob, actually, and to do some kind of interim
His approach.
steps.
I get that intersection twice a day, in the morning and on the way home at night.
Scary.
And I'll tell you, people coming down Hancock Street, believe they
Give a
own
shit.
that whole road. And if you come west to east on Chestnut, you have to edge pretty much all the way, a third of the way out before you
Yeah,
can see
it's
what
awful.
comes down. And a lot of people, if they see the headlights at the top, they're going.
Mm.
And this past year, I don't make close calls, I see people in front of me just like, ooh, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Type of thing. So, I mean, there's a short-term approach for, that corner and the other corner to get, more visibility from the Hancock Street. And maybe just a warning or a blinking light at the top or something to, hey, slow it down or something.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
to touch upon that, or how do we go about?
Well, that's what, is
contacting?
that something we could talk to John about, is maybe looking into
Right away.
something in the interim until this, based upon what Mr. Smith had to say, and his discussions with the neighbor, and,
I just know signalization is, once again, you're dealing with, you know.
no, not signalization.
This is
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
wall, they're taking the hedge down.
Taking the
I'm
hedge
sorry. I
down,
thought
so
we
you get a
took
better
the
sight
view.
line,
The homeowner.
talking to the homeowner and seeing, you probably could help us.
Sure.
Jim.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the right-of-way issues there.
But that homeowner's wall is in the right way. Then,
Yeah.
as a town, something in town.
Yeah, well, we give the homeowner a heads up and say,
Yeah, you gotta-
eventually,
yeah,
eventually it's gonna,
Yeah.
you're gonna lose that anyway, so
Well,
make the most of the situation now.
But it's in the right way.
we could-
Thank you very much for coming in, and we're
Yeah,
gonna
thank
work
you.
on that
Yeah,
complete
and we'll
streets.
convene a meeting with our public safety officials and Johnstone and provide a recommendation to the board within the next few meetings here. but
At our next
While
meeting.
this board is still constituted,
Yeah, as soon as possible. Those figures for accidents are pretty scary, so.
yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on the complete streets, you're gonna provide us with some
Yeah, I
templates on
think-
policy.
I will. I'll give you a bunch of
This
different
is,
policies in the
Yes,
area.
well, I
is
assume that
way
with
up the road,
John
though.
Stone's help, we can probably draft something specific to Abington. That
It
was
is?
the
Yeah, this is
recommendation to
a-
this
Can,
board.
there's a whole matrix
This is-
having to do with
She said
the
this is a-
policy that you're certainly
But
welcome
it's
to do.
on
Right,
the-
well, my point is, I don't wanna I just don't wanna throw a bunch of paperwork at the board. I prefer to provide
We
a
like paperwork. Rick.
draft policy for the board as opposed to reams of paper. That's my point.
Just give us something.
So, yes.
I don't need reams, I just need a piece.
We'll buy the
Andy,
pen.
you like paper.
I like paper.
You
Paper's
like
good.
paper, right?
Andy has more paper
You
than
bring it with
anybody.
you. So,
All right, we have, I think next, unless if the board's agreeable, a joint meeting with the planning board for discussion on several issues, including Governor Baker's new housing initiative, hiring a town planner, updating the town's master plan, discussion regarding the proposed sign bylaw, and discussion of the retail sale of marijuana moratorium that the town put in place last year. Do you folks want to come up to the table? We'll give you some microphones.
Take mine,
And
please.
if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about the proposed sign bylaw first, only because I know we have members of the committee here. They're going to be talking about that,
you're all over.
representatives, so.
This wasn't supposed to be.
I believe that the sign bylaw is in your packet.
Yeah,
It is. Take mine.
because I printed it out.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah,
Oh, maybe I'll keep it,
Mr. Chairman, would you like to introduce the members of your board, please?
Yeah, Rick Collins to my left, Bruce Hughes, and Jeff Rangel.
Thank you for coming, we appreciate it. Go ahead. Wayne.
Just to explain, when I told the board Monday that I was going to meet before the Board of Selectmen, I didn't tell them it was going to be a joint meeting. So that was a misunderstanding from me.
Okay.
So just to make that, and Bob Silver would be here if he, but
Okay.
we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, how do we want to talk about the proposed sign bylaw? I know we have members of that sign bylaw committee. You have a member from your board that was on there, is that Rick?
Rick.
And then Andrew was from, and I know Mr.
John.
Wing,
Bob.
John, so I don't know if,
Bob.
oh, does one of you want to just give us a brief rundown of it, how it works, or you want to go through it piece by piece? I know, Rick, what happens with the proposed sign bylaw? On our agenda, we give it to the planning board, and they're going to have an,
Yeah, ultimately, they've got to do a review and recommendation for town meeting.
Okay.
Is what
Public
they would be
meeting.
doing, yeah, public hearing
so
process.
this is not the public meeting for that, however.
Correct,
You know,
exactly.
it was just handed to us, so we'd like some information on it, if that's all right.
Yes,
Um,
so presumably Andy's gonna do a thorough review tonight.
Oh, there we go.
I'm just
Okay,
kidding.
I was looking more to Bob.
How
but,
about, I
thought
presume
John
it would
could
be
do it.
just a quick procedural overview and then a.
Yes, okay, so we've been meeting
Yes.
for about a year and a half. Initially, we started to try and we gave you the existing bylaw and the proposed bylaw. The existing bylaw, we were going to try to initially just make amendments throughout, but that just became way too complicated, way too burdensome. So we asked town council if they could provide us with a template of an existing sign bylaw. And they gave us the town of Groton, which is the most recent sign bylaw that has been updated and approved by the Attorney General. So we're looking to totally scrap the existing bylaw and replace it with the proposed bylaw. Let's see. So if you take a look at the first page there, well, let me talk about one of the reasons we wanted to scrap the existing bylaw was, if you take a look at the existing bylaw, I think there's 5 pages of definitions, a 13-page bylaw. And we thought that was just way too many definitions, and there were many definitions in here for terms that aren't even in the bylaw itself, so. Our new bylaw has, I think, what, 1 page of definitions? Much more scaled down. We think this is much simpler, it's much more cohesive when you read it. Let's see. The highlights, I think, are,
This is the proposed, this is the,
if you look on page 4, we break it out into districts. So we have the residential district, which would include an R20, R30, R40, TOD, which is, what is that, Rick?
Transit-oriented.
Transit-oriented,
Was in order
and
of the
CBD.
that's the old one.
Paragraph A is the same as existing bylaw, paragraph B is the same as existing bylaw, paragraph C, that's new, and paragraph D is somewhat modified in the size of the sign that would be allowed in that particular district. And if you look on the commercial and industrial districts, paragraph A is new, paragraph B and C are the same, and paragraph D are modifications. Paragraph E, F, G, and H are all new. We did add a provision in here for waivers. It's not a variance anymore, it's a waiver. So if somebody comes in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals and they can prove their case that a literal enforcement of the provision would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, and that at least one of the 2 following conditions exist, the proposed signage is designed to be harmonious with the area or the unique conditions and circumstances are not a result of the applicant taken subsequent to the adoption of the sign bylaw, then the Zoning Board of Appeals could grant a waiver. Anything having to do with site plan review, if there's a site plan review, the planning board would have jurisdiction over signage for the site plan review. So the difference, I think, now is
Right now, we have control over the signs.
over the sign,
And it's switching back to the zoning board of appeals.
except for site plan review.
No, right now, signs come before the planning
Correct.
board.
But in this new bylaw.
In the new bylaw, you're gonna take it away from the planning board and put it back into the zoning board of appeals, where it was originally a couple of years ago.
Except for site plan review. If
Well,
there's,
site plan review, we'd review it, but I'm not quite sure.
you have jurisdiction.
We would have jurisdiction, so we could.
So they wouldn't
I mean,
have to
we,
go to zoning.
the jurisdiction, as I understand it on here, Andy, is that to follow the rules and regulations of what the law is,
Yes.
not to give them a variance or anything.
No,
No.
but
No.
in-
But that-
instead of, like Alex said, instead of having somebody have to go to,
Well, they'd only have to go to the building inspector.
that's
They
true.
wouldn't
I'm
have to
sorry.
go
Yes,
before
yes, they
the-
wouldn't go to the zoning board, yes, yes.
But if site plan review, they needed something more than this states, they'd still have to go to zoning for a variance.
The way it's worded is that,
Waiver.
the purview of the planning board in this process is to basically look at the footprint and the size, make sure it's not blocking sight lines, make sure it's a certain distance back from frontage and other boundaries. But I believe the way it's worded in here is that to make sure they meet all the other requirements regarding size and shape and materials, they get a letter from the building inspector, which they normally would anyway, bring it to us as part of the site plan review, and that's entered into the record.
Yes, to determine, you guys would determine the compliance.
Yeah.
That's specifically what it says.
So we'd get a letter
Well,
from,
actually, the building inspector would determine it. He'd get a
Right.
copy of the plans, and if he had a problem with it, he would notify us.
correct.
Yeah, as
We
part
would-
of.
We
right.
really wouldn't have any say in it.
So really, the building inspector would become the permit granting body.
Which is what they are now,
Correct.
yeah.
Planning board gets it when it's part of a general site plan review, just only for the location of it. And then if the applicant needs to appeal something, then it would revert to the zoning board
For the
for the
waiver.
waiver.
Correct, yes.
All right. How about for grandfathering? When this takes effect, are there going to be issues with grandfathering?
This is going to be a change to the zoning bylaw, so anybody with an existing sign would be grandfathered.
Would be
But
grandfathered,
if they ever change the sign in any way, they would have to go before the permitting
start the
authority.
process over again.
If the change of the sign is significant,
Correct.
that would require going back to this. One of the reasons, we try to be as business-friendly and town-friendly as we could. We don't want to place any undue burden on a business owner that, once this was enacted, that they had to go and get a new sign. So, everything pretty much stays the same as it is, but if it's a new business going in and they need to change the sign, it goes back to this.
Let me give you an example. Trukey's, which I use mainly because everybody in town, I think, knows where Trukey's is. And if you look at that building as it exists now, there's 2 Trukey signs on the building. In the future, there'll only be 1. In addition to that, the entrance and exit signs there, which are a problem even today, with the signs being the size that they are, which are much larger than what's allowed in the new bylaws, those signs would be reduced almost in half. One of the other things that you're asking is that they don't have a logo on that sign. And I can tell you, as an old driver, I'm not a kid anymore, but trying to find a place, and that's a bad example there, perhaps, but when you're driving down the street, and there's a lot, I know I did it recently in Norwell, driving down the main road there, trying to find a place, to look over at the building and drive the car with a road you're not familiar with, to have the logo on the sign in and out, it makes it a lot easier driving, a lot less hazard. I went by the place 3 times. As an example, what you have for a sign at Trukey's, I think is great. The problem with it is, even now, people will go in the wrong way and cause problems. And they'll come out the wrong way, mostly going in, but not coming. But they'll even come out the wrong way sometimes, and it causes and that's on Route 18. To give you an example, on the Dunkin' Donuts, as you go up Route 123, there's a small sign there that's no bigger than that, but it has the logo of the cup of coffee, and anybody knows that that's where you go in. Makes things pretty simple. But I think we're being overly restrictive on that. If you look at Subway, on an intersection where you have 2 roads on Subway, on that, over there on 139 and 18, the Subway sign on one side, a Subway sign on the front. In addition to that, the Dunkin' Donuts sign, which is on the same building, which supposedly should be the same sizes, it's very difficult for 2 major firms who, in my opinion, have good signage. It's to eliminate, to make them both the same size would be difficult. If you look at the gas stations around town, if you look at Mobil and Sunoco, they're fairly uniform. They have far too many Mobil signs or Sunoco signs on the building. They're attractive, they're up to date, they're clean. If you look at some of the other gas stations, that may not be so true. And there's signs all over the place, where you get your sticker, where you get lubrication, a lot of those signs would be eliminated. And
Well, I think under the current bylaw, Wayne, a lot of those signs shouldn't be there anyways.
absolutely, and the interesting thing about it is, the
So
reason
that
this
comes
is
down
all-
to enforcement, that part of it.
Absolutely, and the reason we're here, and the reason the big problems have been, is where you go by businesses in town, which, to be unnamed, but I mean, just signs all over the place. Cigarette signs are one of the big ones, and banners and everything else, and they should be removed, and they're not in our original, they're not supposed to be there. And we have asked, and I've been before the selectmen before, and no one wants to enforce them.
Well, I disagree. I think it's much better than it was.
It's better
a
than
year
it
ago.
was
Much better than it
a
was.
year ago, but it's still, there's signs all over the place that should be removed. There's no question in my mind, and the regulations are there. And I have no problem with redoing the regulations, but those are some of the problems. And I know I want to be friendly toward business, and that's important. And then when you have signs that, I remember where the Dunkin' Donuts is right now, there was a car dealership there before Dunkin' Donuts went in there. That rundown, rotten sign, all, you know, I agree, those signs should be taken down. But to think that, and there's another one, another place, I went around town and took pictures, and I think each one of you need to do that. Go around, take pictures, and say, okay, what comes down? What stays up? It's really interesting.
Well, under this, nothing's coming down.
No, I understand that, but if you had a new store, or someone changed hands, or all these other things, I mean, everybody says, well, everything's gonna stay the same, that's already there. Really, it doesn't happen, and it won't happen. And, for instance, there's one store in town, I have a picture of, I'm not gonna name this place or anything else, but I'm taking these pictures, I can't believe this place. And yet I go by it all the time, never really paid attention. And I found out that, oh yeah, because Bob Soper was the enforcement officer at the time, and he went in and said you had to take these signs down, and they came before the ZBA, and they said, no, you can leave all those signs up. And so they're in there for that reason. Which is one other thing. I think the planning board, and quite frankly, we don't need any more work to do, but the planning board, I think, can regulate signs a lot better than the zoning board of appeals can. And in order to get the change, they need a 4/5 vote from us. With the zoning board of appeals, it's 3 votes, and they all have to vote the same way. So I think that's an advantage to someone that wants to do business in town and has an understanding board. I realize that we're elected and they're appointed, and they can change at any time. I just think it should remain in the hands of the planning board. It was originally, and the ZBA asked us if we'd take it over at one time. I know there's controversy on it, but that's what was done. But in any case, I think it would remain better off for the townspeople and the businesses to have a somewhat friendly board to go before.
Well, whoever the waiver granting authority is, it's by majority, it's not 2/3, it's not 4/5.
Well, it might not be now, but it was, in our.
Well, I'm just,
I mean,
in the new
Walmart
bylaw, Wayne.
Walmart was before us and wanted to put a pickup sign for if you bought something online, you'd be able to go there, and they wanted to put a small sign out there.
Their 4th sign.
A what?
Their 4th sign.
What's that?
It's their 4th sign that they came in for.
Okay. So in any case, the point of it is it was a small sign, it's way back from the road and everything else. They needed a 4/5 vote from the planning board in order to get that done.
Again, but under this proposed bylaw, it's gonna be a majority vote. It's not 2/3.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I didn't see it worded in there that it was a majority vote.
Yeah, it says majority.
Is it in here?
Yeah, it's in there.
I've read this a million times and haven't seen that.
Page 7.
Page
We
7.
actually discussed it. This has been vetted through town council as well. She did a great job. I want to give her a lot of credit.
Can you also touch upon what your board was made up of? A member of?
It's made up of or 2 members of the community at large, Bob being one, although he sits on the Board of Selectmen, Bob Wing being the other, and he represents
The business
and somewhat
association.
the Abington Business Council. Member of the zoning board, John
Mhm.
Shepherd, and a member of the planning board, Rick Collins, and myself as a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
The reason probably, it says the zoning board of appeals may grant a waiver by majority vote.
Yes.
And the planning board was a 4/5 vote.
Yeah.
Bob?
The whole reason for this meeting is to present what we have.
Yeah.
And then, this isn't set in stone. We're looking to get input. I mean, I haven't sent this out to the businesses yet because I was waiting till tonight.
Sure.
To see if there's anything big. But we're looking to get input back from the businesses if there's any changes that we, to go back with and need to make or anything like that. We're open. We're open to changes as long as they meet town council's approval and we think they would be beneficial to the town.
If we could put these on the website now, and anybody watching on TV, if you have any suggestions, please contact send an email to the Board
Yeah.
of Selectmen or any of the members of this sign
I
bylaw
was
review.
gonna ask the same thing, Ken. I would suggest you put this on as well as the existing sign bylaw, so you can see the two side by side.
And I think, to Wayne's point, a lot of the stuff that we see is really an enforcement issue.
Yep.
You know, she has done a great job.
Yeah,
in the last
absolutely.
year. As Wayne says, there's a lot of places where you can hardly look out the windows because they've got plastered with paper
Yeah.
and stuff. I mean, I agree totally, but that's an enforcement issue. It doesn't really, whether you use this one or the old one, you gotta, somebody has to sink their teeth in.
Because
and go and enforce it.
this not only covers signs outside your business, but it also covers signs on your business, in the windows of the business, that sort of stuff, so.
Well, that's,
and
you know,
people don't think about that,
At
you know?
Trukey's, for instance, you go there and it's 20% of the window. The interesting thing is, and I've got a picture on my cell phone, there's one window, the first window, it's a big window. So that sign complies with that window because of where the frame is. Now, there's 5 or 6 other panes that go down there, and then it's, 50% of the window is taken up with the signs. Now, the signs are a substantial distance away from the roadway. I don't even think you see them. I know you see them from the roadway. I don't know how you drive a car and see them. But
Right.
when you drive in the parking lot, then you can read the signs. And if it helps business, and it helps Trukey stay in town, I mean, obviously, people wouldn't put signs up if it didn't do them any good. And the more business they can do at Trukey's, the more chance we have of having them stay in town.
You see other establishments in town, though, that they, I mean, you can't even see in the
Oh,
establishment.
that's correct.
There's a lot of places in town. Go ahead, Rick.
And neon signs that, you know, you've only had one, which is an open sign. There are a lot of stores that have 4, 5, 6 neon signs inside the store. They're small, but
Oh,
they
yeah.
sell cigars, they sell,
I
you
think,
know,
I think this whole thing was prompted by, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the packages of the town, the lights were just blinking, LED lights, and the neighbors were complaining. It was really bad, and it was bad. You know, it was bad. Rick, you had something to add to that?
I just wonder if it would help to get into some of the specifics about what people would most likely notice as a result of this bylaw change. For instance, on the facade of a building currently now, you can have internally lit signs. Signs are lit by the inside by, you know, either a diode or
Yeah.
fluorescent lights. We go back to saying that they have to be lit from above or backlit, just to make it more uniform. I think that was the initial intention of the bylaw way back when. We specifically addressed the amount of a window that can be taken up by an advertisement to make sure that they aren't just blacking out essentially the entire window with an advertisement. We restrict the use of neon lights in windows, neon signs in windows to, I believe, just open and closed. We prohibit the use of temporary pennants and banners and wacky inflatable arm guys on the side of the street. We clean up some of those
Not
issues.
the, not the way,
Yeah.
oh, all right.
I mean, they can come get a temporary permit if they got a sale, but the point is that, you know,
Those
some
feather
people just.
signs that were all over the place.
Yeah, so we're trying to clean it up and tighten it up a little bit. Some of the things that people have complained about, noticed, that really, they're more of an eyesore versus a marketing.
Yeah.
We talked about the issue of, all right, so you have a roadside sign, you have a sign on the facade of your building. Now you can have 2 entrance and exit signs with every street cut. Do we want to have more marketing material on that? That was what led to some of the issues, some of the language that's in here. But those are kind of the main things that you'll notice. Doesn't change electrical signs, doesn't make them have to be all wood, doesn't make them have to be all, you know, externally lit from above. There's still a lot of variation allowed. It just really tries to clean up a lot of the language and identify the high problem areas.
Now, you talk about signs not taking up more than 50% of the window. Now, is stuff like that grandfathered in? You know what I mean? I mean, with the practice at some of these places, like, I mean, let's say a package store blocks the whole window with a sign, would that be?
I guess that would be, depend on whether that's a temporary sign or a permanent sign. I would imagine that those would be deemed temporary signs.
Town council argued that if the next time they change it, they lose the grandfather status and they would have to go to the appropriate sign.
So if you take the meat sign down and put up the chicken sign, does that change?
Yeah, they get changed every week, so. Jeff?
Well,
And
what I was
then
gonna
after-
suggest when you brought it up is that's one of the things that should be put right in the bylaw is to define the grandfather clause so that we're all not guessing at it. And so if someone comes in here and they go, what's my question? Okay. But I would very strongly suggest, because that is going to be the largest question, and that's really the only question anybody cares about.
I think so, too. John, you got a question?
One thing I want to point out now, I've represented oil companies for many years, and one of the biggest things, the oil companies spent tons of money finding out, and professional sign was the very important thing. And these laws all started back in 1955 primarily, the sign laws. And it was primarily 2 signs were allowed initially. Over time, it's evolved, and once somebody does extra, someone's trying, well, he can do it, I can do it, and it's just gotten so big. Getting back to the oil companies, their studies, and they did tons of studies, they proved that, like Sunoco and Mobil both did these big studies. They said you have 7 images to the average person remembers when he sees a location. 7. That includes the building, that includes your big sign, that includes your gas pumps. So now you have 4 signs left to make an impression. The rest are worthless because you're not looking for that. And if you don't change them or make them different, people don't notice it anymore. It loses effectiveness. So advertising is very important to be done properly. You don't see banks getting 30, 40, oil company. Mobil only puts extra signs, Sunoco only because it allowed it here. They were amazed when they came out here and said, wow, how did they get, if they can get them, I'm going to do it. So that's a problem that we're addressing, I think, pretty correctly here, and trying to get professional looking signs out there and not these glitzy stuff, different colors and paper ones and this, banners flying. So we're uniform is the word I'm looking for. And I think this is the thing that we tried to do here. And remember, 2 signs is how they started out statewide. A lot of towns still use that. Cohasset. You're going to say Cohasset stuff, but you're seeing Holbrook now has gotten pretty tough. They've trying to improve their image. You've got to do something to start and make people change. Building inspector said half the rules we had, you can't enforce them. So that's, and again, Mr. Bezanson brought up, we do this committee, and this is where we're at. And that's all I have.
Anybody have anything else to say about the proposed sign bylaw?
No, but if you have specific things, Wayne, that you want to point out, just, as Kenny said, send them to us. And we'll
Yeah, well, we're going to have a hearing. We have to have a hearing within 60 days of town meeting. We can't have it before that by law. So we'll hold a hearing, and people are welcome to come there.
Yeah, but I think what we would like is something before that, because we don't want to have you come back and, if you have specific, you personally or anybody else has specific changes, please get them to us.
All right.
So we can present something to you that you can have a hearing on, that everybody, we're trying to get consensus here. That's why we put this group together. Somebody from the planning board, somebody from the zoning board, somebody from the businesses in the town. So we could all kind of get together and say, this is what we think is acceptable. So I don't want to get to the point where we're at town meeting and all of a sudden, you know, we're arguing. I think
That's what happens too often.
Exactly, and I look back at the way we did the charter. When we did the charter initially, we went to town manager, form of government. This is the way we did it. We put together a group, we had public hearings, we had all kinds of input, and we all came together and said, this is what we think is best for the town. And that's what we're trying to do here. So we're not trying to ram something down somebody's throat, but we had to start somewhere. And honestly, I don't think the existing sign bylaw is very workable if you read it. It's very, very difficult. As I said, 5 pages of definitions, and 3 of them probably don't even exist with definitions for things that aren't in the bylaw.
Well, that's the thing, when a bylaw's been around for 10 years.
Exactly, it gets added to and changed, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Jeff?
Well, I just want to make, one of the large issues here, because we're really missing the boat on this, and it's a big step back in time, is not allowing internally lit signs. Almost every sign is going to that now, and they're most convenient things for the owners. Plus, they use a lot less electricity, and you can see them. I know throughout Norwell and Situate, Hanson, they do the top-down lighting, and it's almost impossible to read the signs at nighttime. And the rear ones that are lit from the rear, you can't read because of the light beaming around it. The other part of the internal lit signs is that one of the most difficult things to read is anything on a white background. Letters, white is what fills your eye space up. the black letters and everything else disappear because they're such small pixels compared to the rest of the white around it. But I think we're missing a big thing here with this not allowing it externally. I just can't see any communities taking a step back in time and going back to that type of law.
Just so you know, the current bylaw, internally illuminated signs are not allowed. So it's not like we're changing that, that's.
No, but it's come up, and that's the number one thing is I want a new sign. Who wants to get a sign that isn't the LED? Everyone wants an LED sign. There should be a big section in here on that, talking about or referring to the lighting area as to what type of fixture, what type of bulbs, what type of illumination in it, that it has to have a dimmer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, little tiny things, whatever it is. But I really think that's a mistake that I think every single person is going to be coming before the board looking for I don't know what the difference between a variance and a waiver is, but coming for that's going to be the main thing that's going to come for between our boards, is people looking for LED signs. They're not going to want, and who are they even going to buy these antique signs from, I'm not sure. Not allowed sign people.
So I'm confused. You want to allow LED, are LED signs going to be not allowed?
No, they are.
They are allowed.
We're talking about more like there's a plastic front and there's bulbs inside of it that shine out through the, not talking about the electronic signs.
No, internally lit sign, that's what it says in the bylaw, but no internally lit signs. That's
Like the Trukey's in and out sign.
anything that lights from behind, anything that's not projecting onto it.
Right.
So whatever it could be.
So if you have a sign, the used cars, and a fluorescent bulb in between it.
Well, I mean, the sub-galley sign that's on the side of the road,
Yeah.
that's an internally lit sign. That's not addressed by this, but that is an example of an internally lit sign.
Now, what I guess the thing is, to bring up is whether we put I think it's a mistake, but coming back to the architectural side of things, I always try to find what's the right place. But do we want to put a halt on it right now and be very specific about it? That really should be part of the purpose and intent type of thing. Is, do we want to, because, the reason I say that, because we've already got a small explosion of signs. The gas stations have gone to it, Sion's have gone to it, a couple of restaurants down by the Stop and Shop. There's little examples everywhere. Everyone's using these LED signs. And for certain, I mean, we're so used to seeing signs at the back time where people used to hang up letters and half the letters were missing and it was misspelled. And no one wants to maintain those kind of signs. They want to be able to do it from inside or at least be able to control it without having to worry about sending Fred out there to try to spell a word with half the letters. So I guess I'm saying is that we should really rethink. I think we should think out further about the requirements of internal signs, of allowing them.
Just again, that's not really changing, because right now, a prohibited sign is an internally illuminated signs. Those are not allowed right now in Abington.
But right now, they're all through Abington, and like I told you, people coming in for
But I'm just saying
LEDs.
that this bylaw is not changing what we currently have in Abington.
Well, regardless of the bylaw, that's not the way, the bylaw's been thrown out the window, because you
I
look
hope
at.
not, that's not.
No, well, you can tell it, you can look at all the signs. All the signs contradict the bylaw we had. So it's been allowable. People have been allowing it either through variance or wherever it is, they've been allowable because they built it. And we had the bylaw in place. The only problem, again, it always comes back to, there's nothing wrong with the bylaw here. Well, there were some things that are kind of, I have to read the code all the time, and I'm looking for things to be simplified, but they have to be really black and white. They gotta be very black and white. Can't be any gray areas when you're interpreting zoning when you come in. I'm a dumb draftsman looking at this, and my boss tells me, go read through the first things here and put together the sign requirements for what it says by following these rules and regulations. And so the more specific they can be, the better. But it all comes down to, we've had a bylaw, which really isn't much different than this one, other than this one's a little simpler, but it all comes down to enforcement. So either no waivers or no,
Well,
we don't do
as
that.
as the drafters, we don't have any control over whether or not a board grants a waiver or grants a variance. But we give the opportunity for somebody to be able to get that. But we can't control that. That's up to whoever the granting authority is, so.
Yes, but we're rewriting it right now.
Right.
So I'm saying that this is what we have been doing. This is what our business model's been, regardless of the sign law. regardless of whatever was written there, it's been enforced in a particular way, and it's universal through the town.
Well, I guess to Kenny's point again, so do you think we should have internally illuminated signs allowed in the bylaw, or is that something?
I think you need to address it, because we already have it. 90%
But
of the signs
you are
are.
addressing it because they're grandfathered in, but when they have to go to change the sign, they won't be able to do that anymore. They'll have to go with an LED or a newer style sign.
But that's internally lit.
No,
Isn't it
actually, you can still get them.
Okay.
You gotta get a variance.
A waiver.
An LED sign like the one that's at the.
But an LED is not an internally lit.
No, it's not.
It's not.
How do you say that? 'Cause-
An LED line that you're talking about, like if you go to the end of the high school driveway, the sign that's right there, that's an LED.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically, yeah.
that's not what we're talking about.
That's not an internally lit sign.
That's not an internally lit sign.
Okay.
Consider it.
Internally lit signs.
Well, then again, you need to, see, that one thing about definitions is, I gotta say completely different, that every code I go through, whether it's the Department of Public Health, the state, whatever it is, the thing that all building codes are modeling to is put as many definitions as they possibly can.
We do define internally illuminated sign in this new bylaw.
Okay, but I'm trying to tell you right now, right on town floor, all the misunderstandings here, there's a few gray areas written in here that should be addressed.
Well, again, Jeff, if
Point
you
'em out.
have, yes, if you have concerns, then please get them to us. That's the
Well, I'm
whole
just bringing-
purpose of
Okay,
this.
but I'm just bringing up the argument of the internal sign, because we have it. It's like pretending we don't have these signs. Regardless, we should change it. Should we either say, I guess you are
It's
changing
gonna be
it.
up, well, we're not changing. It's gonna be up to the town, number one. We're not the one, we're just proposing this to
No,
try
but
to clean it up.
it would be
The town will be the one who ultimately, the town meeting will be the ones who ultimately decides on whether or not they think this is the change they wanna make.
But what's happened the last 4 or 5 times we've had signed bylaws come before us, the exact same thing that happened 2 years ago, is that we have 2 points of view, and the next thing is someone says, let's get a committee.
Which is why
And
we're
it
going
just
through
goes
this
on and on
process.
and on, and that's why the sign bylaws haven't changed much over the last number of years.
Bob?
Well, actually, you talk about the illuminated signs. We're talking about illuminated signs on the building.
Like Lowe's,
What?
like the words Lowe's.
With the 4
Yes.
signs on the Walmart.
Yes.
But the street
That's the street
signs still
signs.
have illuminated.
No. He's talking about like the 4 signs on the Walmart, or the signs on the Lowe's, the illuminated signs on the buildings. That's something, you Stop and Shop, the pharmacy, all the signs that they have on the buildings. That's what we're trying to get under control.
Well, that's where we talked about that, where after a certain distance, it doesn't make a difference what's on that building. It's like the signs that came in about Walmart, they wanted a sign so that the guys would drive, people that didn't know where they're going would follow the truck route, go around. They're 300 feet off the road. You'd have to stop and stare down there for it to be a bother to anybody. The only complaint we've had was on the street on the sign, that people across the street from Route 18, they were getting a lot of backlight into their backyard. But it doesn't make sense to apply that same bylaw to something that's so far off the street that you just can't see anymore. So those, comes back down to that small things where you gotta make, for the public, it has to be idiot-proof. Like Wayne said, one way of making it idiot-proof is you put in, out, Trukey's, idiot here, which even with those signs, you still see people pointing out the wrong way. So, and that's the whole thing, they're not gaining any advertisement when they say truck delivery. Well, that's nothing, all they're doing is trying to be, well, provide service to their customers. But it's certainly not a distraction from the street. So anyway, anything else minor,
Well, that's what, that's what the whole thing is. I mean, if you've
Yeah.
got things, we
Yeah,
send them over and.
please, yes.
minor, mostly housekeeping.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Wayne?
Yeah, another thing that's sort of interesting, I went by Lowe's, I mean, you look at everything, and a roof line, the Lowe's sign is not the roof line. The Lowe's sign basically is above the roof like this. Theoretically, I don't think that's the roof line. And so theoretically, that sign shouldn't exist there on top of the building.
They probably got variances when they,
No, they didn't get it, I'm sure they didn't, they just put them up, this is typical, but the point, and then they'd have to get that waiver, so.
That's exactly why we put the waiver clause in there, was
So you
because
can-
in
so
case there was.
Exactly right, we discussed that.
In case there was a business that wanted to come to town, but its branding said that it had to have a sign that was X number of inches of feet over the roof line, or it was a red roof in, or whatever it was, but it had to be slightly over that we were able to say, okay, this looks fine, we can do it in this case.
And that would determine who was making that decision.
Did you say the Red Roof Inn's coming to Abington?
Yes.
Okay. Bruce, you had something?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One, Rick and Bob have talked about this, the Abington Business Council. Got to have the meeting, got to sell it to those people on that.
We're not trying to sell it.
Well, I mean, just discuss it,
We want input from the business.
discuss it with them. Okay, phrase, discuss it, get input, get their interaction, because that's important, because we've been to those meetings, and they're great sources of that information. And my other comment would be enforcement. Whatever plan is adopted through all this input needs to be enforced. Because the damn thing is, it isn't any good unless it's enforced.
I think we've made so much progress in enforcement the last year,
Yeah.
6 months.
So hopefully, a plan will be adopted that will be good for the town and will be enforced. And that's what I,
I hope that everyone understands that, there's a lot of work that went into this.
Oh, yeah.
But we know, even once we address some of your concerns and some of the business concerns, it's not gonna cover 100% of everything
Oh,
that's
yeah.
on. So we've allowed for, for that in here, and going forward, we're hoping that this template will make it easier for us to add or to take things out. As Andy said, when we started to look at the other one and addressing issues in there, it was horrendous, it was horrible. There was no way we were gonna be able to do that.
have you ever gone on, Mass Planners Listserv is a great, okay, I'm a planner, but something called Mass Planners Listserv, and there's always great discussion on that. I'll be willing to put that on Mass Planners Listserv, sign bylaws, towns thinking about doing that, and get some input. Because you put something up that, and you get all the planners in the state, reply to that, so you get some great, so I'll do that tomorrow, just get some input.
That'd be great. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or comments on the proposed sign bylaw? Thank you, folks, for all your hard work. Let's get into it.
Make a motion
To what? That's,
Wanna wait?
yeah. But while we're on a roll with some fun discussion, let's take on the discussion of the retail sale of marijuana moratorium. Last year's town meeting passed a moratorium. It was a temporary moratorium. And from what I've read, and forgive me if I'm ignorant on this, but there's 3 options you can do now, is make a permanent moratorium, change the zoning. There was another option too. But Wayne, you probably know more about this than I do.
Well-
Or you guys have a plan?
Well, we're going to have a bylaw, which we're working on. We're going to discuss it at the next meeting. But to begin with, the town of Abington voted to have, I think probably Bruce has got a lot more information.
Now, what Bruce is passing out is what local towns have been doing, and some of the articles that they're presenting.
So we want to have an article for town meeting. We discussed briefly having an overlay district rather than say that, back up a minute. The town of Abington voted to have marijuana in town. So we feel as if.
At the polls during the election,
polls,
the majority of
at the
people in
election.
Abington, yes.
So in any case, I think we're obligated to have something on the agenda. And basically, at this point, I would say that we have to make it available in the town of Abington.
Can I just stop you 1 second?
Yeah.
This is, just for people watching TV, this is for, they call it pot shops.
Yes.
The other medicinal. Medical marijuana, the town.
allowed in
is
town
allowed in town.
presently.
Okay,
Yes.
already. Is that zoned in certain areas?
That's zoned,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Zoned only for, I'm sorry to interrupt,
ahead,
Mr.
go
Chairman. Zoned for, basically the triangle of land north of 139 that encompasses the area north of the ale house, over by the concrete precast place, car toll, coal tar.
And there is plans to put one in there. Someone's already come for approval or
I've not-
preliminary? Oh, I
No,
thought,
there's been no one's come before our
But
board.
there's
but
been some discussion.
people that-
Okay.
They were gonna go into another town, and they were giving them some hard time, and
Okay.
they
All
spoke
right.
about coming to Abington.
all right, so this
But-
is the pot shops. Go ahead.
Right, but, so, what we thought we would do is have an overlay district on Route 123, from Rockland to Brockton. And that's the only area in town that the pot shop would be allowed. If it goes before town meeting, that way, then the people in the town could say, no, I don't want it from Route 58 to the Rockland line, or I don't want it from 123 on Washington Street to Brockton, or whatever. The area could be made smaller at that town meeting.
But couldn't be made
But it
larger.
couldn't be made larger. So it's a suggestion of the board, and this was, no vote was taken or anything else, that we make that the overlay district. And that's how we present it to the town of Abington. We'll also have some rules and regulations, much similar to what we have with the medical marijuana. But who knows what's gonna happen.
All right.
What is the area that you're proposing?
It'd be Route 123 from the Rockland line. In other words, instead of saying it's in a highway commercial, or a transit-oriented district, or R2030, which is crazy, but we're gonna have an overlay. We thought that would be the best way to do it. That way, it's controlled along a major Route 123. It's not on 18. You can't say it can't be anywhere, or they can put it anywhere. So we need to have a zone where they can be. And if we don't, as I say.
Why wouldn't you propose it in the same zone that they have medical marijuana allowed?
I'm not quite sure that even if someone wanted to take us, it's in some funny districts, so someone could make a pretty good argument about it.
Do you know what the different zones are on that strip?
On that, yeah, most of it's highway commercial, but I mean, it's a.
Is there any residential in there?
Probably. There is some.
There are, it's not, yeah,
Residential houses, but
there's some spot zoning on there. It's not totally highway commercial.
It's not,
Just to be clear, this hasn't been voted on yet by
no, I
the planning
understand.
board.
This was just our idea as far as,
Just, to me, that just seems like a big swath of roadway.
Rockland doing anything
But it could be reduced. But what if it isn't?
in a specific zone?
I wouldn't leave it to town meeting that night to reduce it.
All right, hold on a second. We have a question. Do you want to come to the microphone, because yeah, please. Oh, wait, there's no microphone. Go ahead.
I apologize for all my coughing.
No problem at all.
So I'm a Rockland Selectman, so we are going to zone for recreational marijuana. Our bylaws are going to be presented from town council next meeting, but we're anticipating it probably being in the same places as our medical marijuana, but we have a much larger area than it sounds like you guys do. We have, our medical marijuana is in our hotel district, so there's multiple streets and multiple areas. So we're anticipating that, but I'm not sure yet.
Where is your hotel street over, strip over
Right off the highway.
On Street.
Right off the highway.
Commerce, so it's right off the highway on Hingham.
Commerce and Hingham Street,
Yeah,
yeah.
that area over there.
But then we could go into the subdivision, the developments in there. Not housing developments, but in the industrial parks. Okay, yeah, yes, okay. Does the board have any feelings?
Personally, I know you haven't voted. I'd like to narrow it down a little bit, I think.
no, and if you had some areas you'd like to narrow it down, if you could get in touch with us so that we could eliminate some of them right now, before we finish the article. To answer the question that was asked earlier, the highway commercial is basically, not exactly, but almost the whole way from the center of Abington to Brockton is almost all highway commercial. And then there is some, as you go through the center of town, there's a little central business district, and there's a little bit of, believe it or not, no, there's none. And then there's a lot of R30, and then there's a transit-oriented district.
That's up towards the Rockland area.
Please?
That's up towards Rockland, I would
the
imagine.
TOD is
Yeah,
off
where the
Summer Street.
TOD, where the train station.
Train station is, yeah. And where's
then-
the R30?
But most of that's R30 from almost the center of town to that district. And then when it leaves the transit-oriented district, it goes back to highway commercial on both sides of the street up to, yeah, it's mostly highway commercial on the rest of the way, all the way to Brockland.
So I think Plymouth was proposing in one of its amendments to actually put it downtown in one of the areas.
I think that's the balance, is that I think if you're gonna put a pawn shop in a town, you want it to be with his business, because it's not really, it's, you know, it's the variety store, I guess. You know, it's a food store, a variety store, they're gonna sell all the things that go along with the pot shop, so it's like a catch-22. Does the town want to encourage the tax revenue and welcome them, or do we wanna say outskirts of town, like a strip club, or, you know, that sort of stuff?
I mean, this is the economic argument, is that this is gonna be a multi-billion-dollar industry in Massachusetts. It's probably gonna be, it could be range from more like, almost like a craft business, like with District 10.
The brewery, yes.
You know, that's where you could see, you know, a very niche, high-end audience. Or it could be something else, a little bit more industrial or different. There's an argument that the first business in is gonna have, see a lot more investment than, you know, the 100th business to come to enter the industry. So, you know, do you wanna be Sorel or do you wanna be Subway? You know,
No slide on Subway.
No, it's just the fact that the first ones are gonna get the bulk of the investment, so.
And is there a limit that we can put on the number of shops?
We can't have less than 20% of the liquor licenses. So I don't know how many liquor licenses we currently have. 20?
Probably 21 for all alcohol.
Yeah, so you're talking up to 4. We would have to pass something at, I don't remember if it's town meeting or town election to go below that number, but we'd have to take some sort of action to limit it to just 1 or 2.
So I guess the town has to make a call, whether we want to welcome them as a business, or do we want to banish them to the outskirts of town? That's just my thoughts.
And because the town voted to legalize it in the 2016
It's
election.
52%, I think, in Abington.
Correct.
Or thereabouts, yeah.
We have to have a 2-step process to prohibit it altogether. We have to go to town meeting, and then it has to go to the 2018 ballot.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the options, yes.
To add one more wrinkle to it, Bridgewater, my understanding, I think Bruce can correct me if I'm wrong, they voted to prohibit retail sales, but to allow the industrial cultivation, manufacturing, producing, the industrial side of it in their town. So that's another option.
I put together, I'm on a planners working group for the state, for the regional planning agencies. And we have to outline, you know, what the status of the marijuana stuff is in our districts. So I put this spreadsheet together for work. And, you know, bearing on what Rick said, it's interesting. December 19, 2017, Town of Bridgewater voted to ban the sale of recreational marijuana, but they don't ban cultivation, manufacturing, and testing of recreational marijuana. Halifax did something interesting. They put a 2%, town meeting voters approved a 2% local option sales tax on marijuana sold for recreational uses, as well as amendments to zoning bylaws that allow recreational marijuana establishments in areas already zoned for medical marijuana. So that might be something that we might look at, is, you know, adopt.
That's
Because I
something
understand
that-
sales tax is a local option.
That's something that towns can do?
Yeah, it's a local option, I believe. You know, you could talk to Charlie Seelig in Halifax, and I've been meeting the town manager, I've been meaning to talk to Charlie. But I thought that was a pretty clever thought. And that would be a source of revenue for the town, you know, if we went that way.
Yep. Does our board have any opinions on this? It's a touchy subject, you know, it really is, I mean.
We have to do something.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to picture the business. Alex, what area did you want eliminated on 123?
Definitely the R30. Personally, I think it should be allowed in in a highway commercial zone.
So it would just,
Any highway commercial zone?
Yeah,
it amounts to about 5 blocks, so we'd just eliminate that section there.
That becomes 18 and 123, effectively.
Well, I think if we're gonna allow it, I think we should allow it in a certain zone rather than certain streets.
Well, the problem when we do a certain zone is that you open it up, that's a map, for instance,
No, I
and if you
understand.
did highway commercial, it would be here and all the way out here. If it was, obviously, it wouldn't be residential, but, and if you went to Central Business District, it's that one there and this one over here, so I really think the overlay is the best way to go.
Because the overlay allows
Well,
the
you-
existing zoning and, you know, there's restrictions that you can do on.
I mean, I would have no problem with the overlay on 123, with the exception of any R30 on 123.
Yeah, we can eliminate that. That's no problem. You can eliminate the transit-oriented district if you wanted to. I mean, you can.
You should do that too.
I got to be honest with you, I mean, we've had tattoo parlors in both the centers of towns, okay? One.
Not allowed use, but they were granted variances.
Right, but I mean, I would rather see, not that I have tattoos myself, I have no problem with a tattoo parlor, but I would rather see a pot shop that's gonna make us more money than a tattoo parlor.
Well, the interesting thing on tattoo parlors is we had that before us when they first came out, and we restricted it pretty much all over town. And then we had the zoning board of appeals come to us and ask us that, since they were giving them variances almost wherever I guess they came in for, I think they're mostly highway commercials, they asked us to change the restriction on it, which we did.
But when tattoo parlors first came, when tattooing was first allowed in Massachusetts, it was a stigma, and towns tried to ban them. And now look at them, they're in the centers of our towns, and, you know, they've been pretty good, some of them have been pretty good neighbors, so.
From the station.
But you put your Spencer's, and I put your Spencer's Goods when I think of a pot shop.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know whether you can, and I hear ones Rick has pointed out, ones that you've seen online that look like Apple stores. I mean, they're beautiful.
Just to raise the issue of use variances once again.
Yes.
So, no matter what you folks do, no matter what the town does, the use variance is still gonna be here, I would imagine. We have
Well, they're allowed by special permit on.
No, let me finish, please, let me
medical,
finish.
yeah.
So, potentially, if somebody wanted to go in front of the zoning board to get a use variance for a pot shop in the zone that's not allowed, they're gonna be able to do that.
That's true, well,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
they could.
true.
You can do it in R40, I mean.
Exactly, because of the fact that we allow for use variances.
But what we're trying to do is, if you're gonna come to town, we encourage you to go to these
Be aware of
locations
that,
that the town has picked.
Well, in some towns, I mean, I know Middleborough very well, and if you go before them and you want to have a variance, you've got to show a hardship. And certainly Abington doesn't necessarily show a hardship. I mean, they give variances out. So it all depends, I mean, people go before the board and they just say, hey, what's your hardship? Haven't got a hardship? Don't even bother coming before us. And that's what happens in a lot of towns. There aren't any variances.
Well, you know, the state is also doing zoning reform. And one of the things with zoning reform is it's gonna take away a lot of the variance granting authority, so it should be interesting. See how that plays out.
I mean, in conjunction with allowing in certain areas, I mean, I do like the idea of trying to recapture some of the local option tax along with it.
I think that's something that we should look at.
So, well, why don't we at least take out the R30 in that overlay?
I would like to also take the transit area out completely.
Which is by the train station?
Yeah, it's the area, Summer Street by the train station, that area there.
Right.
Where the convenience store is directly across.
So this would include basically where Mary Lou's is and all that. That's the central business district, correct?
They could have it in there,
Right.
yeah.
And then probably from
It-
Bank of America to the Brockton line.
Right, it would be allowed,
Especially the 700 block.
and really, from the center of town to basically to Route 58, there'd be nothing there.
That sounds,
So in addition to the zoning, we also then have to figure out the actual regulation of the licensure, which is a whole other ballgame as well. Because the final regs are about to be approved from the Cannabis Control Commission, and in it, it does give the town some leeway to regulate hours, safety, how the licensing process happens. So that's something that goes also beyond just where we're gonna locate it.
would that be part of the article too, or not? Or no, that would be a separate issue?
That would be up to,
And
that'd be
that,
up to the
Probably more like a liquor licensing authority.
Yeah,
yeah.
these examples that I gave you folks from Plymouth and from Halifax specify this out, the hours of operation. For example, the Plymouth one, it's got retail limit, hours of operation, days of operation. retail by right, retail by special permit, you know, all this stuff. This is all spelled out in both of these things that I gave you. Actually, the Plymouth one is excellent, I think, because it gets into the whole discussion of the bylaw and stuff like that, too. So these are things that we would put in the bylaw, because we would want to explain this to the folks, what everything was. Not trying to give extra work to us, but we have to do this.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a plan in place, if that's agreeable to the board. I mean, it's going to come back to us at some point anyways, if it's
Just-
an article.
Just to voice my opinion once again.
Yes, sir.
I would prefer, and I know other people don't think this way, I was not for this initially being passed, but town voted for it. I would like to see it just in the same area that allows for medical marijuana establishments. At this point, you can always, I would prefer that we only allow it in medical marijuana, where the medical marijuana establishments are allowed.
But that would be a much bigger area than we're allowing it now.
It's more concentrated in an area that's far away from.
No, it's, the medical marijuana is all the way from, almost to the center of, on 18.
It's in the industrial zone, I believe, right?
It's highway commercial. Yeah, highway commercial is allowed all the way up.
Medical marijuana, I don't think is allowed in the highway commercial zone. It can't be.
That's what says on the table.
Yeah, highway commercial, industrial, and TB.
I thought it was.
I thought it was just exclusively industrial. Well, that's where I would prefer that it goes, just in the industrial zone.
Can I ask a question about
That's my preference.
But
schools and permitting away from distance to schools?
Well, the regulation says 500 feet, the state regulation, what's 500 feet?
I was gonna say,
It's
that's,
five house lots, and that's what the state, recommend.
Yeah, but there wouldn't be any schools currently on this route.
oh, I'm just thinking of future.
No, but I mean, they wrote it right into the bylaw in Plymouth, but, I mean, if the state says that supersedes anything anyway, so.
I just wanna make sure it's covered, that's all.
Yeah, it will be covered, but, I mean, the question is how far. I mean, 500 feet is nothing, and that's what a lot of.
No, just because I was involved in police logs maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was a number of arrests where people were found to have marijuana within 500 feet of the school and were arrested for that.
Oh, that's correct.
So I was just thinking whether or not we could go to 1,000 feet, in this town, so just to make sure it's never gonna go near a school.
I don't know if you can exceed the 500 foot.
Can't exceed the state?
State.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Actually,
Well,
if I can do an advert, in March, Citizens Planner Training Collaborative, you folks have gotten that information. March 17th, we're going to have a session on the latest marijuana laws and stuff. A couple of them, Paige is going to do it. I'm going to be at that conference, so hopefully some folks will come out. We've offered this at Old Colony Planning Council, by the way, too. But this information is available, through Copeland Page and stuff like that, the latest information on that. So there's a lot of literature out there that could help us, we're drafting the bylaw, too.
Can we have, for town meeting, have an article for the 2% local tax, sales tax added to?
3%.
3%.
Okay, that's fine. Can you go up to 3?
I believe there's a fractional rate that you can go up to. I'm not quite sure.
Because that would be separate than,
Used for the implementation of the law, but I think one of the things you can use for is perhaps, drug enforcement officer or resource officer or some sort of
Education,
licensor,
drug
education.
education.
Well, there's a local sales tax option, which is 3%.
Yeah.
right,
And then you have to enter into a host community agreement with the.
Correct.
okay.
And then that's another
All right.
3% for that sort of thing that you're right about, yeah.
Okay. Our board can look at that. Okay. Everybody's satisfied with our discussion on drugs? I had some members talk about, let's talk about the housing initiatives. I think that Rockland Selectmen is here to have maybe add some insight to that, but you have more handouts?
The big things on the housing is basically that they've come up with $10 million a year. The state, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
10 million, you break that down between the.
Let me, I know Alex asked for this to be on the agenda, so if Alex wants to touch upon this at all. The Housing Choice Initiative was designed to build on progress being made by cities and towns in the housing field while providing more tools and flexibility for municipal leaders. Governor Baker on December 11th unveiled the new housing administrator. This is in the Beacon, by the way.
Yeah, and I actually just wanted everyone to start getting familiar with it, and then, you know, see what we want to do about it. I don't expect any votes or anything like that. It was more just an informational item. And our colleague from Rockland was the one that sent it to me. I don't know if you have any input.
Well, I'll give you a brief rundown, and then you can take over. I was just reading what I read about it. It's enacts specific zoning changes, which include zoning for multifamily and cluster development, establishing by right zones for accessory apartments, allowing for transfer of developmental rights, development rights, and reducing parking and dimensional requirements, such as minimum lot sizes. And I think one of the big things that goes with it is it no longer requires a 2/3 vote for zoning. Typical zoning requires simple majority. But do you want to speak up on this at all?
Sure.
Thank you.
The reason I brought this to Selectman Bezanski's attention is in regards to a bookend that Rockland is running into. We have enacted the 40R overlay district already in the downtown, but we are having difficulties producing units due to water and sewer. You guys have overcome your sewer
Yes.
issues. We now are getting our own, but also water issues. So I approached Selectman Bezanski in regards to my concern with on the utility side of things, because it was sort of a chicken and an egg problem. If you check enough boxes, sort of like green communities, and you do the things you're supposed to do under the housing choice plan, you can get grant funding to help you expand your utility access. But the problem is, if one of the things you have to check is you have to produce units. So Rockland, for instance, can't produce any more units until we can increase the amount of water capacity we have. And I'm assuming since we have the same water service, you guys are in a similar issue. Selectman Mullen and I both contacted John Keenan and expressed our concern regarding the sort of chicken and egg problem during the hearing on this bill. So we're hoping that that gets cleared up, because this bill was really put together for communities like ours that sort of been stagnant when it comes to residential development, to help us sort of develop affordable housing, but also more densely developed housing, more smart growth. And I don't think that this sort of impact was anticipated in regards to utilities. So that's why I sort of we had an interesting comment in a sense on the utility side. So that's why I brought it to your attention. And I think I also made the comment to Senator Keenan that I assumed that you guys were in a very similar situation on the water side of things as we were.
Well, since we share Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks, and we do have the sewer, Dan Callahan had said that since we have 500,000 gallons of sewer, we need 750,000 gallons of water a day to support that. And we're not going to exceed that or come anywhere near using that 500 anytime soon. But it's definitely an issue for both towns. And we just lost a grant. We didn't get a grant recently because we don't have enough, you know, conservation and measures in place. I think, Rick, you were explaining that to me earlier. They're looking, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So the town has two problems, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
In regards to the housing initiative?
In regards to the water issue. We'll go to the water
Okay,
issue
okay,
first.
all right.
The water issue is really, we can't do the housing without water.
Correct, right.
But we have a storage problem where we can't store enough water, and we also have bumping up against our limit how much water we can take out of the ground.
Actually, I heard there are no permits. They've applied for permits for Myers, but because of the type, I'm a drain sewer person, not a water person as much, but because of the type of aquifer it is, there are no limitations from DEP or EPA on withdrawal, but they're trying to get permit limits. So right now, we don't know how much we can take out.
Yeah.
But we do have a storage issue because we can't treat it. We need to be able to store more in order to treat it before we distribute it to users. That's how I understood it.
And traditionally, my understanding is that before DEP lets you take out more water, they usually like you to show that you're, have conservation measures and, you know, you're doing something, that you're fixing your leaky pipes, getting your inflow and infiltration under control. You're taking those steps first to free up extra capacity versus just sticking another well into the ground. So you know, I don't know what the exact problem is, but those are a couple of the issues that usually
And we
pop up.
think that's the reason we didn't get this grant. And we had Senator Keenan write letters, we had Congressman Lynch write letters supporting us, and we think that's the reason
I
we
have to
didn't.
say though, I'm surprised because our unaccounted for water is less than 10%,
Is it?
which
Okay.
is very low.
Yeah.
You want it to obviously be zero, but that's kind of unheard of, but under 10% is ideal. And I heard that number thrown out at the last board meeting I was at. And I was surprised by that because most communities, having worked in public works for some time, most communities are in the 10 to 20% range, so I was pleasantly surprised.
So this is going to come into play possibly with the redevelopment of New England Dot. I mean, if there's a lot of units and they don't have the water. But this isn't really a housing initiative issue, this is more a water issue.
Well,
Well,
the
it
reason
goes-
this was all tied together is because we can't really do the housing initiative until we resolve some water issues in town. Right now, we have enough water if someone wants to pull a permit for an addition or a single-family house, or maybe 3 or 4 houses in a small subdivision. The one up off Dorsey, Crossley Street there, that was resolved years ago because the original developer made an agreement with the water department and put in a whole new water line on those streets. But another development coming in like that is gonna have a problem now getting water.
So now what can we, as the Abington Board of Selectmen, Rockland Board of Selectmen, do with the waterworks to help them? Is that what the bottom line is?
I think maybe, and Deirdre and I have both been to some water meetings where they brought in both towns, but I think we need to talk with Dan Callahan and see what we can do to help him along, and maybe do a joint meeting or at one of their water meetings, you know, and some of us go to that.
We also have, just from Rockland's perspective, I don't know what you guys' zoning looks like in Union Point, but for us, this is also not just a capacity issue for that, but also a capacity issue for our future development for us too. So this goes deeper for us, you know, and but I know you guys have been held up with the sewer thing forever, and you probably feel so good that you're out from underneath that finally, but now you've got water running on you. So I just,
We don't have water for Union Point right now.
yeah. That's what
So
we,
if a development came in there, we don't have water for it.
I mean, obviously, the Joint Waterworks knows they don't have enough water.
Yeah.
Maybe we should approach them as a joint boards and say, is there anything we can do to help?
That's
I'm not big, I'm not in favor of prying in other boards' business, however, you know, and.
No, but I think the two boards of selectmen and the water department working together, maybe there's things out there that our legislators.
Well, that's what we
can
kind of
help
did
us
with the sewer commission, and we let them do their thing, and then we asked them if they needed help, and then we got on board, and Andy was a big proponent of that, and we went over to the Brockton City Council meeting and tried to just show our support. Maybe that's what we can do in that regard.
So I think maybe if you want to reach out to Dan Callahan and maybe have us that want to.
I wanted to let you know, they are submitting a grant, well, there was a grant for mass housing that we were gonna encourage Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks to submit for engineering for that storage for miners. And when our Marcy, I don't even know what her title is, she's the assistant, I think, to our town administrator. She sent multiple emails over to the water department, didn't really get a response, eventually got a response. They said they were already working on it, but that's all we're getting out of them. Like, I can't get the details, because we would have written the grant, you know, we would have done it to get them to apply, because we want to see that capacity increase. And obviously it would help you guys too, but I just feel like we're kind of.
Yeah, well, I think we need to meet with the Dan. I know it's a separate board and they're separate elected officials, but it affects all of us. Planning board, Board of Selectmen.
Would it be agreeable that we ask Rick to contact the Rockland's town manager and then jointly contact the board and see what our boards can do to help?
See if we can have a meeting with the water department and.
We just certainly don't have any issues getting a hold of Mr. Callahan.
Right,
He's usually here at a moment's notice when
Yeah.
but we'll be happy to.
We asked to meet with Mr. Callahan in one of our meetings, and he sent us a letter, so.
Okay.
You didn't come to the meeting?
We
Just
can
one
always
other
go, we can
piece.
always go to one of their meetings.
The Housing Choice Initiative, and Bruce could probably explained it a lot better, but this isn't a really far reach for us to meet some of the requirements that are in here. I think we already do a few of the things that they want us to do. We allow accessory uses. We have multifamily by right, I believe, in a couple of districts.
Because we're a green community and, you know, we adopted a lot of that stuff.
It's more just, you know, we're on the right path.
Utilities are gonna be the problem in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've spoken to Chris Clutchman, who is the director, and she actually presented at Old Colony at a January meeting. I gave you her card, Ken, but
Yep.
she's willing to come out and present to the town. I can't speak for her, but I did say that we have some communities interested. So it might be worth, and I have her contact information on this, it might be worth reaching out
Well,
to
I said this meeting with the water, and then after that,
Yeah.
Rockland and having to look to get, I mean, we're all in favor of doing things with joint towns. We're gonna talk about a joint planner too, a town planner at some point, but we do things with Whitman now, and we do things with Rockland, so I think it's a great thing, so.
But I would be in favor of changing the zoning so that a majority could change the zoning in town. I think 2/3 is very valuable to the town of Abington.
I was just gonna say, with regard to this, I know others that meetings I've been to, there is some concerns about how making it too easy to change zoning can be a concern. How it can be too easy to stack a town meeting to change zoning. And again, not to be cynical, but we've all been around a long time, and
Is that part of this?
Yes.
yes.
Governor's bill.
But- And that's only to change zoning for projects, right, that are being
Right, so,
considered,
yeah,
okay.
there's some.
The other thing, just to throw out to you, is that the school department's wondering what to do with the North School and the Center School, and if what you're doing is, if you want to see more affordable housing in town, maybe this is an opportunity for the town of Abington to have their own affordable housing, either housing for the elderly or whatever, at the North School or the Center School.
Absolutely.
And that might be one of those kinds of projects that you could get some of the $10 million a year that the governor has given away.
Mhm. Bob just listened, Bob heard that for his committee, so. Anything else about the, so we're gonna move forward and try to, see if they need some, see if they'll meet with us, all right? Everybody okay with that? Thank you, Deidre, for your help on that. Where's my agenda? What else do we have? All right, I guess the biggest things now are, a possibility of a town planner, either by ourselves or with another town, and updating the town's master plan, which kind of coincides with that, because I think last time we had a town planner, and I'm not sure, I think it might have been before my time, but they helped a lot, and I think Rick told me this, that our town planner, Mr. Crane, was that his name?
Dan Crane.
He helped a lot with the town's master plan. The master plan has to be done, Wayne,
Well, supposedly every 10 years. The town of Abington has done it. However, when we started researching it, actually Bruce did most of the work, but we found out that one town, the last one they had done was in 1960, and they just had it done recently. And I think the town of Duxbury was done somewhere in 1980, and just had a new one done. So evidently, we're way ahead of the curve. But the problem we have is when we first did it, we had Old Colony Planning Council do it, and that cost was around $15,000, if I recall. The second time we had it done, which, as you mentioned, Dan Crane in July of 1999. That's what it looks like, if anyone's ever seen one. And Dan Crane did a lot of work on that. And at the same time, he spent a lot of time with the South Naval Air Station, which we might get into later. But and so we got it done fairly reasonable. Now they tell us the price for having a master plan done in the town of Abington is around $150,000. And quite frankly, I question the value of that. Again, Bruce got in contact with, talked to a number of towns and things like that. And there's a school called the Conway School that's located out in Northampton, I believe. And so he put me in contact with the professor that runs it. I talked with him on it. They are doing a master plan right now for the town of Townsend. And in fact, later on this month, they're having a meeting there, and he's invited anyone that would like to go to it to see with them. The students, in conjunction with the professors, come up with a master plan for $7,000. the neat thing about it is you've got young people involved in it, new ideas and everything else. For me, I don't see where this is worth $150,000. I'm told that you need one of these things in order to get state grants and everything else, but whether they do it or Old Colony Planning Council does it or some outside agency does it, probably doesn't make any difference as far as the funding is concerned. So I've talked with them. They would put this on their project. They would do it in January, February, March in that semester at the college, and make a presentation. They'd have 2 presentations for the public here and 2 for the board. And they'd have this O plan to go on, which was just 10 years ago. And I think that's the way to go, and the planning board's proposing to put it on the agenda on the warrant for $20,000, and the reason it's $20,000 is there are a couple of things that they don't do on the master plan, and that would give us some leeway. And they do have expenses over the 7, it's mostly travel for the students, which wouldn't be that much. And I think that's the way to go for it, and the board does too.
Have they done other towns that they have done that?
They're doing Townsend right now.
Okay, yeah.
In fact, they're doing work in Brockton right now for their park system.
Go ahead, Bruce.
City of Brockton, Rob May. When I first, a guy reached out to me because I put this on Mass Planner's listserv, again, which is a great resource. And they reached out to me, so, well, who have you worked with around here? And they said City of Brockton. So I know Rob May very well. He's AICP planner, City of Brockton. And Rob highly recommends them because they've done a lot of work in Brockton. Brockton has a fantastic planning process, but Rob is worth every penny they pay him. But that's a city. But Rob, he highly recommends them. And so but as Wayne said, they're not going to do all of the things. There's a few elements like housing, economic development, also handicap access and stuff like that. And Old Colony Planning Council can help with some of that. We can't do a master plan again, I'm speaking for Old Colony, we can't do a master plan as part of the DLTA, so don't ask me to do that, because Pat told me, Pat Trammell, $150,000. But we might be able to help out with the elements. And I think a committee of the town could do some of those elements that they're not able to help us with the help of Old Colony.
Excellent, sounds like a great idea. Yeah. Anything else, guys?
So you're gonna do an article on that?
Yes.
Well, that's great. That'll pay for a lot of $130,000 savings. That's amazing.
It's really great for the town to have a current master plan, and it's terrific that Abington's been proactive, but we had Dan.
Yeah.
Dan is now well retired and enjoying his retirement in Florida. But it's, to me, as a planner, as a professional planner, I think it's fabulous that Abington's being proactive on this.
I agree. Anybody have any concerns about that or reservations? I think it's a great idea. All right, now let's talk about a town planner. Wayne, I'm gonna let you go first, because I have a feeling I know what you're gonna say.
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to talk about.
No, please.
We had a discussion at the last planning board meeting, and 3-2 in favor of having a town planner. I was not in favor of having a town planner, and Bob Soper also. But we had a town planner. We had Mr. Foreman here for a few years. That did not work out very well. We had Dan Crane, who was absolutely phenomenal. Basically, Dan told me, he says, Wayne, I don't know even what I'm doing here, after we had all the base stuff going on, which he was great with, and he did the master plan. So from those 2 standpoints, and it's very valuable at that time. Quite frankly, it's amazing, but when you look at the base and what ended up happening over there and everything else, I wonder if we should have just said, hey, do whatever you want, because basically, that's exactly what they're doing over there.
Yep.
We get things from them even today that, what do you think about this? I mean, they had one project just recently that came before us. There's only one way in. I mean, you wouldn't allow that anywhere in the town of Abington, and yet they just, they just do it. Yep. And we send our information over to them, and it's Katie by the door. So they're going to do what they want to do over there. And so I really begrudge all the time that we spent on that. But Dan was very influential. That was a very important time for me, anyway, to have a town planner that was very knowledgeable.
No, let me just stop you there now. I kind of pandered to the TV audience, but a town planner, what would their job description, what would they actually do to help the town? Now, I think a lot of the concerns are now that our sewer capacity has been lifted, the moratorium's been lifted, and there's a lot of development going on. I think that's the reasoning why people want to get a town planner.
But there is a little bit of development going on. There isn't that much land in Abington anymore. Planning board, in my estimation, handles the job very well. I mean, on Veterans Place, which is in the Rosen's project up here, I just can't see where we have any large tracts of land or any substantial planning to do. Certainly if he could find more water for the town of Abington, I don't think that's his job necessarily.
Right.
Or maybe to write grants, but maybe that's a grant writer for the town of Abington. I just can't see whether we get a full-time planner, and some people will give figures. I remember the first town planner we got, they said it was only gonna cost $50,000. Well, and the planning board was against it. The town voted for it. And
I was for it.
huh, okay, thank you. But the point of it is that I don't see where the value is there. I mean, they said it was going to cost us like $50,000 or $60,000. I remember having the discussion. It's just no way it's going to cost more than that, and it does by the time you get through with all the benefits, the retirement, the health insurance, everything else. You just can't hire anybody for that price, and so I'm sure someone in this room can tell you exactly what it costs to hire someone if they look at all the figures.
All right, now
But I don't see where it's worth it.
Now, you're surrounded by the three people that
Absolutely.
voted
They're
yes.
right here,
So
man.
I just.
I'm done.
If you guys can, I'm ignorant. I don't really know why we need a town planner, so try to tell us on
I
it.
think they can give you their point of view, and I wish they would.
Bruce, you want to go first?
We have, at the planning board meetings, we have professional representatives come to the planning board. We have lawyers, we have engineers, we have planners. These are hired guns for people who are gonna come. And it's not to disrespect the members of the planning board. Wayne's been on the planning board forever, and Rick and Jeff and myself, and I have a certain amount of experience at it. But I think you need to have a professional to consult. Town of Abington hired a town manager, town administrator, because, no disrespect to the Board of Selectmen, but running the town needs to have a professional. And you need to have people like Rick, and you need to have people like Nora. And I think development of a town, we need to have professional, now I'm a planner, okay. But I think we need to have professional advice from someone who's trained, someone who has experience. Whether it's a full-time person or a part-time person, or whether we share it. But I think we need to have someone in the room, beyond the consultants that we hire. We have Dave Johnson, who's a great consultant. We have consultants that we can consult with, but I think we need to have someone in an office in this town hall, whether it be on a full or a part-time basis or shared with the community, who can give professional expertise and professional advice to the board on an everyday basis as these things come into the town hall. Now, Liz Shea, for example, gets this up and she's fabulous. But myself, I think I would be more comfortable if we had a professional in place. How we go about it will be determined, but I think in 2018, the level of development that's going to happen in this town, and let's not kid ourselves with the water and the base and the Route 18 redevelopment and 123. We're seeing 123 being a commercial corridor in the town right now, and that's going to get more. A lot of housing is going to go away, as you know, we've talked about that. There's an article going to be on town meeting to rezone the technology business district to another zone and stuff like that. So we're going to see more commercial development in town and also residential development. I think we need a professional.
Rick?
One of the concerns the chairman has voiced about a master plan is that we get it and it kind of sits on a shelf and nothing happens with it, which is a very fair argument. My counter argument is I think with a master plan, with a town planner, they can take that master plan, identify the action steps we need to do to implement the recommendations in the plan, and then help push it forward. So for instance, taking a look at all the town-owned property around town, all the conservation land, and figuring out how we can make it available for people to use or turn into recreational, passive recreational opportunities, trails, parking. IDing development grant, community development grants that frankly we don't know about or aren't aware of. We do this on a part-time basis. You need someone on a full-time who can spend his time or her time figuring out how to better use our commercial highway land. There's a lot of vacant land north of the Ale House. Other ways that we can get on certain lists or marketing opportunities that the town planner would know about to help us market that land better and help bring additional commercial value into the town. You're gonna have, with the airbase coming online over the next few years, you're gonna need someone who's gonna be really sharp and on top of what's happening there. How is this gonna impact Abington? What aren't we seeing as part-time board members? You're gonna have the surplus school issue. We have 2 school properties we need to figure out what to do with. A town planner would be able to look at it, work with the committee to make sure we're making smart choices for the long-term future of the town, make sure it's meeting or aligning with our master plan. We have to figure out long-term what to do with the new fire station. Are we gonna have a single site? We're gonna keep where they are. We have the water issue. We're gonna have continued development. There are so many issues right now that I think it behooves the town to look at a town planner. I think traditionally, I think, and maybe Rick can explain this better in his past experience, I mean, the amount of grants that they can identify often pay for the cost of the salary just to bring them in there. So I think there's a really great opportunity to save money by having a town planner come in, or at least not save money, but at least expand the commercial tax base, which has actually been shrinking.
Yeah.
Which is something we really need to do.
Jeff, did you want to add anything to that, or they cover all the bases?
Covered everything very, very specifically. From a professional point of view, coming into town, the thing I find with towns that have a person like a town planner or a town engineer, someone who is focused on it all week long, doesn't come in and out. We have Mr. Smith. He does handle an awful lot of things that probably that town planner would do, as well as our other coordination. But coming into a town where you have a town planner, someone like myself would meet with them, would come into them and explain to what we're doing with the project. And we get an awful lot of feedback right then and there, very specific information about what the town's looking for, what they're not going to look for, what is the planning board, what have they been looking for? So there's a savings coming in that a person like myself doesn't have to prepare a full set of plans for plan review. I can come in there with all the major concepts, sit down with the town planner and review all those aspects of it. Then when I go before the town planning board, it's usually at that point, the town planner shakes his head, yes, I've seen this, and it's a tremendous benefit above and beyond our consultants we have. The consultants are fantastic, but they're not thinking about Abington 40 hours a week.
Yeah. Wayne, did you, and maybe Rick might know the answer to this, the last couple town planners we've had, did they just leave to go to other places, or did their time expire, or were they on a temporary basis, or?
The town of Abington did not want foremen and got rid of them.
Yeah.
It didn't come before the planning board, it was done by the town.
And then we didn't have one for a while.
And then we didn't have one for a while, and then Dan Crane became available, who, it's unusual to get someone of Dan's capability. He ran PC for a number of years, very knowledgeable, knew a lot of people.
He hired me. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
We'll discuss that. But, and we had the base going on, which was a tremendous amount of work. And he also did the master plan. So from those standpoints, he was valuable. As I say, he said to me, Wayne, you don't need me here. I'm telling you.
After a point?
Oh,
you didn't
I mean,
need him.
I think he left because of, wasn't it financial that he was, wasn't it?
No, he wanted to retire anyway.
Oh, he did. I didn't think we were funding it.
You may be right. We may have canceled the funding too.
Combination.
I believe we.
His projects have been completed, but there was also no funding.
It was a tough
We were reaching
financial.
a period
The
of sewer
moratorium.
capacity and.
Well, the
different-
economy has slowed way down.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's going the other way now. And I personally think we need a town planner, whether it's shared with Rockland and Whitman, or either or both, probably for the next 10 years. I think Route 18 is gonna open up. Something's gonna go up there on Route 58. I think a town planner might have access to potential buyers and help the property owners. I mean, we want to bring commercial business into this town. And there's not a lot of land. I don't think we're ever gonna use the 500,000 gallons of sewer that we got. Because in the 80s, and you guys know better than I do, when the big boom, we were at 500,000, we got 1 million, and all the build-out that we had there, we don't have enough room to do that build-out again. You know, we have mostly commercial land available, and I think that's where a planner would come in.
Does anybody have a job description for a town planner? I'd like to see a
I
job
have-
description for what a town planner
I have a
actually
town
does.
planner
Bruce, you
position.
know how many communities have town planners?
Okay, OCPC region, City of Brockton has one. Town of Hanson has a town planner. Town of Kingston has a town planner. Town of Plymouth has a town planner.
Are they full-time?
Yes, well, I'm not sure about Hanson, but Rob May's full-time and Stephanie Danielson's full-time in Easton. My friend Tom Bott in Kingston, lady in so the towns that have them are full-time.
Did you have one?
Yeah, Carver we had a full-time town planner for, I was actually 20 years ago, one of the skeptics, but at the time, we had a brief shining moment back in the ed reform days in the mid-90s when we actually didn't know what to do with all the money. And we actually did, well, I think there was that 2 or 3 years when there was a little bit of money hanging around, and the planning board back then actually did push for, and we had hired a town planner. And I had the pleasure of working with an excellent town planner for many years after actually, well, we'll put it this way, I've had the experience of working with a mediocre as well as very good town planner. And if you, mediocre town planners aren't really worth the effort, so. But the value of a town planner is really worth its weight in gold, no question about it. Having that focal point for not just businesses, but others in town. You know, that not just that intake person, but that person who also is really an invaluable resource for other department heads and other town officials, too. It's a terrific resource, not just working with locally, but with other state officials. I mean, a lot of the issues you see tonight, we're, as you can see, almost a little bit reactive to, even maybe a couple years reactive to. That wouldn't be the case if we had a town planner, even in a part-time capacity. You know, it would be a great resource for our DPW, a great resource for some of our public safety officials even. So it's not just a staff person for the planning board. That's not the case. It's really a great resource for my office, for the selectmen, for other goals and objectives that affect the entire town. My concern, and I've talked to Rick about this when we talked about it, is whether or not we would have the resources to hire somebody who's good enough, you know, because you don't want the newbie, you know, you don't want the new kid on the block trying to make it, make a new name for them, you know, himself or herself. That's my concern. You know, a startup job for somebody. Could we get somebody who's got enough experience, you know, to do the job we would want, because it truly is a great asset to a community to have a good town planner. You know, again, even a shared town planner with another community that has similar attributes, similar goals. So yeah, I have concerns about, excuse me, if we could get an appropriate candidate in a startup job, whether or not we'd have the assets. I mean, obviously few people know as well as I do, you know, whether we'd have the resources to put in that position, you know, as we're, you know, eking our way through another tight budget process. That's obviously a concern. But certainly in terms of making it, if this is a work, you know, collectively, if we think it's a worthwhile goal, then obviously we'd make every effort to try to make it a reality. And again, whether or not one of our local communities want to partner with us is obviously another question mark. Another concern I have, and I expressed to Rick too, I think, is, you know, my peers in the communities we talked about are both retirement track. So obviously that gives me a little concern to the extent that I can count on our possible partners to be there for several years, so we could establish roots with a position. So, again, these are challenges. These aren't things that I would be, that are overly daunting, but things that just to, be concerned about as we maybe take on a project like this. Not that we can't overcome them, but just things to keep in our mind. So, those are my thoughts. But like I said, it's a tremendous resource if you can get the right person, and not just for the planning board, for all of our boards and other department heads too.
Can you maybe do some research and find out what the salary should be for a planner and a job description for our next meeting?
I can certainly
Or
do that.
email it to us?
Yes, I can certainly do that, yes.
Do our board members have any other opinions on this, or?
No, I'd like to get some more information. I'd like to
Sure.
know what the salary range is. I'd like to know what
Yeah.
they actually,
Yeah.
a job description as to what they would actually
And
do.
the towns that,
Yeah, some input from the surrounding towns as to whether or not they may
surrounding
be,
towns that have them, and.
or even the surrounding towns who you might partner with, whether or
Yeah,
not they're gonna,
exactly.
any interest from
Yes.
Whitman or Rockland.
I mean, I have spoken to Alan Chalker in Rockland, and I know he has personally expressed interest, whether or not, that's supported by their boards. That I don't know. That I don't know.
Or Frank Lyman and whatnot.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the town of Hanson as a town planner, and that kind of surprised me. It's a small town. I mean,
Well,
is that,
you know-
do you know if they're a full-time or part-time, or?
Well, I know Old Colony Planning Council just hired their
Yeah.
town planner. Have they backfilled that position?
We hired the
In fact, she
woman
just
who worked
wrote
in the
our,
Bridgewater Planning Office, and we hired Laurie Muncy, who actually, and these folks are working, if you had time, they're working on your DLTA project, anyway.
Right,
But,
Laurie Muncy actually wrote our Green Communities Act application. That was her first project at Old Colony Planning Council, so
Yeah, we
very
just-
glad you hired her.
We just had Mike Q town manager, come from Hanson to our Comprehensive Economic Development, I try not to use acronyms, SEDS meeting, because they've got an issue in Hanson with the old Ocean Spray plant, on 27 and stuff like that, so you're gonna use their town planner and us. So, I mean, if it's a small town like that, and I wanted to cite the example of Easton, Stephanie Danielson, talked to Connor Reed, who's the town manager over there. Stephanie is involved, like the manage, all the town boards get together and all this, and she's consultant to all the leadership of the town. And that's what I think a person would be useful for, like Rick was saying, to be an asset to the police department, the fire department, the DPW, you guys. Not just us.
I have concerns, I'm sure, like that Wayne does too, that the costs, I mean, if the cost is to put 2 police officers on the street versus to hire a town planner. But that being said, if you get your money back, you folks have to hire consultants, you would not have to hire consultants, might save a little bit of money, and the grant money that would hopefully come and flow in, and the increased tax revenue with bringing business to town, it might pay for itself. So that's things we have to look at, I think.
That would be down the road, too.
Absolutely,
Several years
absolutely.
before we
Yes.
saw that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of both town planners we had that they brought any money into town, and I don't recall any of it being
Yeah,
done.
and I agree, Wayne. I don't think that's the kind of pressure. You can't say, we're gonna hire you, now you gotta,
No, but-
dance for your money. That can't be the kind of
No,
pressure
but-
you put on an individual. I mean, and as I say, when you see a position description, being, that's, the first line isn't write grants to keep your job, you know what I mean? So that's, we don't tell other people that either, but
Unless they're a grant writer.
but that doesn't mean your assets aren't well worth, your existence in the town, so.
I think you guys made some great points both ways. Is there anything else you would like to talk, that was all that was on the actual agenda, but is there anything you want to talk about, anything else between the two boards? 'Cause we discussed a lot tonight, and the meeting's gone long enough, I hope not, but,
They can come back another
yeah.
night.
Can I pass something along about DLTA project? This is Old Colony. This is the Abington Access Road,
Oh,
and,
That was one of my updates tonight anyway, on my
Yeah.
general update, but if you.
that plan is in peer review, and it's been done, and it's in peer review, and it'll be passed along to you folks.
Okay.
And that's-
Sorry, I didn't mean to take
Oh,
something
no,
away from you,
not at all,
Rick.
that's the
I
ultimate.
knew I was gonna be here
access.
tonight, so I had this.
Yeah, from Route 18 to the municipal complex in the event of emergency, yeah.
I gotta tell you guys, I enjoyed this. This was great. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Anybody
You
likes
guys,
to talk about
you guys get to go home. We're gonna be here for at least another hour, an hour and a half, so.
No.
You didn't bring enough chocolate for another hour.
We have an executive session, guys.
Well,
so-
make sure you lock the door, Ken, if you're gonna be here another hour, hour and a half, so.
All right, a public, have it some crack. A public comment guy left, vote to refer proposed sign bylaw to the planning board for review. Well, that's kinda.
Motion
really
to
vote that?
think
oppose
you
signed
should.
by law, planning for
You're still
review.
gonna do that, yeah.
No, I think well, I don't want to, if we have comments coming in the next week or so, which I would, again, if you guys have comments
Absolutely don't.
on the sign bylaw, please get them to us so we can,
But even if you update it, why wouldn't you still refer to
because
them?
what we're sending to them, I think, is kind of what we're looking to be the final version,
Fair
so I
It
think.
says proposal.
Anyone watching at home too, if you're still watching.
We'll be having a hearing in April, too.
April.
Yeah,
Still
that's, I think,
watching,
when it
you
would
might
have
have
to be
other
is April
issues,
now.
but,
Then you wanna wait till
I
like
would
March
prefer
or
to- Don't you
something?
think, Bob? I think we should wait.
I'm gonna disagree with you.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think due diligence was done to that document, and I'm willing to accept change, but what happens if they don't get back to us? What happens if no one gets
Well,
back to
then,
us?
by
Give
the
them
next
time.
meeting, we
Yeah,
we
we
can
have
do it.
There's no reason why we can't give it to them now, then they have 14 days to schedule their, whenever they're gonna put their meeting out, but at least it puts them on the,
Well, they said they're gonna do a
but they're,
hearing
in April,
Yeah.
right, but at least they're under,
We're not gonna do town meeting till May 21st.
and they have to do it within 65 days of the town meeting, so,
Within
So-
65.
within 65
So they'll
days.
do it in April.
And I think after tonight, the discussion tonight, we might get more input from the public, too. I'd rather wait to get that input, have one more meeting, and we can talk about it.
Like I said, I can disagree, that's all. I'm allowed to disagree.
Of course you are.
I have my opinion, and my opinion would be is I'd just rather move it forward than wait to see what does or doesn't mean. I respect
I
your
have
opinion.
a sense, you going down in flames. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to table it, actually,
Okay.
until our next meeting.
Until the next meeting.
When do we meet again?
March 12th.
March 12th.
That's 12.
That's fine.
All right?
Yeah.
You agreeable with the board to table it? Tom?
Sorry?
Want to table it?
Sure.
Okay, so, all right. Approval of minutes, January 8th, 2018, open session. I think we were all there.
Motion to accept the January,
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. Approval of community garden gift account. Mr. Griffin's Dairy, Mr. Town Manager? Or Assistant Town Manager?
Yeah. This is an account that would be set up this year for the community garden. They're charging $25.
What?
For the gardeners to have the plot up there, the garden plots up there. So what they'd like to do is to keep that money separate, hence the gift account, and use that money for maintenance and upkeep of the garden and supplies, hoses and mowing and maintenance.
This
So
has
to
nothing
keep
to,
it-
nothing to do with the plot stores or anything, right?
No,
Okay,
not-
just
nothing to
checking.
do with that.
is
It
there a
keeps
dollar
it separate.
threshold in this?
It keeps it separate because there's a,
They do on like gift
there
cards, I
already
don't
is a
think they
Griffin
do.
Dairy gift account, so this keeps it separate. This is strictly for the community garden.
Is there a dollar threshold on this?
No, no limit.
Can there be a dollar threshold placed on this? Are there any threshold on any gift accounts?
Nope, there's no need to put a limit on it. It's not, that's not a requirement.
Yeah.
It's whatever
revolving
money,
fu-
it's a revolving, whatever
revolving
money
funds,
comes in,
Revolving
they can
funds,
spend.
you need a limit on a revolving fund, but not on
But
a
this
gift
is,
I would imagine if they get a lot of money in there, the next year they'll charge less for a plot.
yeah, and they hadn't charged all these years. They
Right.
hadn't charged and,
You've had a plot up there, right? Haven't you?
Yeah, every
And
year.
Mr. Burbine, too?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
the last 2 years. So how would the money be expended from this gift account? Who's going to oversee it?
so it'll go down to the accounting office
Yeah.
and say, for example, Lorraine Ryerson,
Right.
she would come in and if she needed to buy a hose, would present the receipts to the accounting office and then they would
They would-
submit their check.
A member of the Griffin's Dairy Committee would.
Yeah. So it's all handled through the accounting office.
Is there any limitation on when and what can be spent on?
It would be supplies and maintenance, so hoses and, you know,
So that would be in the discretion of the town accountant to say,
Yep.
this falls within.
Falls within the umbrella.
Yeah.
Is this form from the town accountant?
Yep.
Okay. Will entertain a motion?
Will we establish the gift account?
Community garden gift account?
Community garden gift account for purchase of supplies and maintenance for the community garden. From funds received from the gardeners.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Set date of special and annual town meetings of May 21st, 2018. Is that late?
No,
Is it usually
We
right
went
the
through
first,
last
is it
year,
usually the
wasn't
first or second week in May?
No, that's about, when did we do it last year? Was it May?
May 22nd.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was,
It's the
it's
same
earlier
time
than it
frame.
has been
Yes,
the
it
past
was-
few
it
years,
was-
actually.
It was in June.
It
Yeah,
was
exactly.
the same, that was before the holiday last year.
Yep.
too. Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
good, because it's
Last
before
year,
the
Where are
holiday.
you proposing we have the town meeting?
At the high school auditorium, the new high school, the new auditorium. It's available.
And the town election will be there too, correct?
Yep, town election will be
Uh,
there.
I don't
that's-
think,
I think
no.
that's
it's-
still to be recommended, I believe, by the town.
Oh,
And the,
you don't think, what are you
I
hearing?
think she was, I think the town clerk, I don't want
think-
to speak out of turn here, but go,
it was, they were, I believe they were thinking about Beaver Brook.
Beaver Brook,
I
yeah.
believe. That's
Okay.
still to be recommended, though,
Just
to the
because the
board for
parking is easier.
your consideration. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Is the
So,
board in
so
favor?
this is effectively the same
Jim
week,
down there.
the same date as last, the same week as last
Yep.
year.
I think so too.
Motion to hold the annual town meeting on May 22nd, 2018.
Special and,
Special annual town meeting.
21st, 2nd, or 21st?
21st,
21st,
Um,
Bob.
7 PM.
7 PM?
7 PM.
Motion to set the date of May 21st, 2018 at 7 PM for the special annual town meeting.
Second.
motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. Open special and annual town meeting warrants. Do we set a close date now, too?
We should, right?
I was looking at the calendar, if you, just if you don't mind, I was just looking at that. If you wanted to close the annual town meeting, maybe your April 9th meeting might make sense. And I was thinking the special town meeting to keep it open longer, because that's for this fiscal year, maybe at your May 14th meeting. Just 2 dates, I just looked at the calendar, that would work, if that's what you wanted to do.
Would the May 14th work for both, or, I mean, I'm sorry, the April 14th work for both?
Or they could, you could do the, April 9th for
Yeah.
both.
No, I'd rather I'd rather have it
Longer for
open
the s-
longer if,
Yeah?
May 14th for both.
oh, you can't do May 14th.
Oh, May 14th is too, right.
Yeah.
April 9th, you could do.
Is there a meeting after
On
that?
April 9th.
Is there a meeting after that in April?
We have two.
Just do
at the
9th.
same time.
April 9th,
Both of them?
yeah.
Keep it simple. If the,
And then we can always change it.
yeah, if you need a special, if you need to reopen it for an emergency, then
Yeah, we can always do that.
2 months.
keep it simple.
Do we have another meeting in April, or is just the one?
Just the one so far.
Yeah, but if we,
We can
that's
always, we
getting
need,
that late in the game,
Why don't we have a second one anyways? We're gonna be doing budgets and articles and
I
everything.
won't be around, so that's up to you.
For when? Second meeting in April?
Yeah.
We're rating you in. Don't you know we're rating you in?
Wait, so you're gonna miss your last meeting as a selectman?
No, when is the last meeting?
April 9th would be the last meeting.
Yeah, because,
April 9th.
You're not gonna have you're not gonna have 2 in April.
well,
We don't have
but
it.
that's up to you. but,
Yeah, we could if you need it.
Are we
By
supposed
that
to have
point,
two
we're
of them?
hoping, we're obviously hoping our budgetary
so
situation
April
is.
9th, we could do a meeting April 23rd,
That's true.
and the election's
That's
on
true.
April 28th.
Okay, fair enough. But I still think it would make sense just to close both the same time.
Same day, I agree.
April 9th.
Yeah,
I'd just like to leave it open as long as possible.
So then let's wait till April 23rd then.
yeah.
Is that okay, if we wait till the
April
23rd?
23rd?
Is that gonna give you enough time to get it to the printer and all, and,
What, the
Give
ninth?
you a whole month.
I would say that,
Give us a month.
I get nervous that late, personally.
a month before? Too
Because
late, yeah.
Because a special town meeting warrant has to be posted, as you know, 2 weeks before, anyway, so.
Close it the 16th, we don't have to have a meeting in order to close
Yeah,
it,
you
right?
can just, right.
Yeah, that's a good point, that's a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah.
Yeah,
works.
just close in the,
That's-
the middle of,
That's a good point.
yeah, I
That's
like
almost
that.
2 full months, well, that's actually more than 2 full
So
months, so that's,
close.
April
on
16th.
April 16th.
Yeah, it's
good.
Open today,
Yeah.
close on April 16th. That makes sense.
Okay, so moved. Town manager's report?
Mr. Chairman, yes, number one, first, as you can see, the Niles Street heavy vehicle exclusion that the board has voted as data has now been submitted to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for hopefully their rapid approval. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll have that, they're approved and the signs can be posted. Delivered to District 5 office last week. So again, hope for speedy approval on that. And as you know, it did, the data did support the conclusion that a heavy vehicle exclusion is acceptable on that street, so. And as you already heard, the alternate access, because of some turnover at OCPC, that took a back seat, that project, but the alternate access is back on, project has been picked up again. So, and I do have some information on that, which I can probably email to the board members. It's just so how their planning process is developing, so. And the budget process is in full swing now with the Finance Committee, although they have been meeting. Now they're starting to meet with department heads as of this past Wednesday. They had a meeting with the police chief, the police department. As you probably already know, we, between me and Dory and Sue Moak, we pretty much staff most of their meetings and make sure that they get whatever they need. So they are fully staffed at the moment. I mean, the full committee, all 9 members, all seats are filled, so with a couple newer members. So they're in pretty good shape at the moment, so.
Can I ask a question on the budget process?
Yes.
Now, is the school, this whole full-time kindergarten, is the school recommending that, or are they gonna be asking for, that's an issue, right?
Well, I'm not,
I've received an we've all received an email or two about it. I'm just curious as to what's happening, basically.
well, I guess I'm not sure what the correct terminology is, in terms of, I know it is, the school is still in their internal budget process, and it is still one of their, it is still contained, the expenditure is still contained within their budget recommendations. So I guess it would be fair to say it's still one of their budgetary goals for the coming year. So it hasn't been dropped yet, so. So to the extent that it's possible to fund it this year.
You told us that the first year is the big expense.
Yeah,
and
it's,
we're hoping to maybe
right, because
kick
the
some of money.
funding would be, most of it would be reimbursable through the Chapter 70 formula, the subsequent year, so in FY '20's cherry sheet reimbursement. So finding this, I guess, to what you call the seed money in year 1 would be a real challenge. So that's what we're trying to keep in.
So after you get over the hump of the first year, it's not as bad?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the
You know what the percentage would be
having
after the first year?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how much of the Chapter 70 we would be getting? They're looking for, what, $800,000?
No, it's about $480,000 would be the cost.
That's what they're looking for this year?
That would be the that would be the FY '19 cost to go to a full-day kindergarten.
800,000.
Well, that's the entire, I believe that's the entire budget, additional budget request.
Increase.
In their level 1 increase. Now, that's being reduced as they go through their, pare down their budget overall, so. So that's the 480 is just the amount attributable to the kindergarten program.
So in year 2 of that 480, how much would be reimbursed by the state?
They're presuming, again, this is based upon their conversations with the Department of Education and a third-party consultant. They are anticipating that almost all of that would be, some of it, well, approximately, I believe, now don't hold me to this, this is what the conversation is at this moment, and they're continuing to seek verification, is in excess, close to 60% would be reimbursable just for that program, but they're also, because of some of their student enrollment increases, that close to 480,000 would be almost the entire amount of the kindergarten program. They'd be seeing in total is an additional increase in Chapter 70 year 2. So a substantial chunk of the kindergarten program plus an additional amount reimbursable because of their additional enrollment, which they've already seen in absorbing this year. So they're optimistic that most of what they're.
Do you anticipate that if they come to you in the budget discussions with that number, do you anticipate recommending to us to use money, the first year money from
Well, this is.
stabilization?
Well, this is what we've been talking about, and we actually met with a member of their budgets, the school committee's budget subcommittee, and, you know, we kind of termed it as kind of, that's phase two. Phase one has to be bringing in the rest of the budget at a certain point before we can even get to that conversation. If, you know, bringing in the rest of the budget, operational budget, within the parameters of within the town's spending parameters, first, and that parameter is within approximately, about a 3% operational increase is where the town is right now, based upon what has not been a particularly impressive state budget, local aid budget right now. With our fixed costs being what they are, we can afford about a 3% increase. Now, as you know, you mentioned that number, Alex, that from the level one, from the school committee's first budget number, that's not a sustainable budget. Obviously, you know, $800,000 plus. If we are at about a 3% operational increase, and we have verification that next year's Chapter 70 reimbursement is going to be close to $500,000 additional, that's going to more or less absorb the costs of a one-time investment to get the kindergarten program off the ground, then we may feel very comfortable recommending a one-time investment of funds this year to get a kindergarten program off the ground. That's kind of where we're honing our knowledge base at this time, so it's a little bit, it's daunting, but we're learning, though. I didn't know till a couple weeks ago that 80% of the Commonwealth already has full-day kindergarten. I didn't know that. It's a little less prevalent in this part of the state, but the march is seemingly inevitable. So if this seems like a good year to make that happen, and next year we feel very comfortable that we are going to get a substantial Chapter 70 reimbursement, and we are working with both the Department of Education as well as a third-party consultant who is the guru on this, a guy named Mark Abrams. I know Tom knows that name probably way too well from his own dealings. If we feel comfortable, then you may get that recommendation.
Okay.
That's what we're working together on that, so.
Thank you for answering that question.
Just two questions, Ken?
Yeah.
One, can you get us, do you have a working draft budget that you have?
Yes,
Can you get us a copy of that?
yes, yes.
Does your budget,
It's only slightly different from the one you got in December, but I
Yeah,
will get you
that's
that this week, yes.
does your budget include any new hires, any new positions?
It does not.
It does
No, it doesn't. It does absorb the two positions in the
Two
police
police
department that
officers.
were grant-funded. It doesn't include any detectives, no. That's,
Or any other personnel in any other
no,
department?
does not, no.
Thank you.
So. And green community status, this past week, Dory and I and Wayne Norling met with DOER and some Ngrid and one of the Ngrid's contractor with Ngrid to discuss projects for which to designate, to dedicate $164,000 of our initial designation grant so that we can comply with the requirements of that grant. So, as you can see, one of the things we obviously want to do is try to kill as many birds with one stone as we can, and some of the capital upgrades that we have to deal with, regardless of the designation grant, some of the, town hall, library, COA, some of the systems that are aging and in need of repair, or dare I say even failed and failing in need of repair. are the areas we're gonna concentrate on first. Some of those needs are being costed out at the moment, and we can see what funds we may have left for some other opportunities. Our initial application has to be in later this month, so we're working to see what room we might have for some other smaller projects, so. But again, it's a really good opportunity to, again, kill two birds with one stone. Once we get the initial designation grant, once these funds are expended, we'll be in a position to, on an annual basis, be involved in competitive rounds for a lot more money, but in competitive rounds for other projects on a more community-wide basis, so. But this is, the timetable, what is not very generous for us to spend these initial funds, so. I guess I'll leave it at that.
It says you've met with National Grid. You happened to meet with them about these ugly wooden telephone poles at the end of the
Oh,
street?
yes, we did. We met with them a couple times in the last couple of weeks, actually, and I'm sorry, when did he say he was gonna probably have some cost estimates for us?
He said this week.
This week.
You'll have
so-
some cost estimates on
Yes.
the two-pronged project, whether it's the one unsightly pole, or whether it's the one unsightly pole and all the other poles.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
all right.
That's on the back.
yes.
All the other
Thank
unsightly
you.
poles.
Right.
When we were, yeah.
Thank you.
When we were talking about the articles, town council was gonna write an article for the pods, the storage containers, when that issue came up a while ago. I'd like some sort of article on town meeting to regulate those pods.
Temporary storage pods? Okay.
The ones that become permanent.
What's that?
The ones that become permanent.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to discuss before we go into executive session? All right. I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of negotiations with non-union personnel and not to reconvene in open session.
So two motions.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, yep. Tom?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Yes. Chairman says yes. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.